A dying billionaire walks into his own restaurant wearing a disguise, and what he discovers will break your heart. Ethan Vale has everything: money, power, a business empire, but only 3 weeks left to live. When he goes undercover as an ordinary man, he finds corruption poisoning his legacy and a shy waitress who shows him what truly matters in his final days. This is a story about lies, love, and the devastating truth that changes everything. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Dr. Morrison's office hummed like a funeral dirge. Ethan Vale sat in the leather chair across from the oncologist's desk, his hands folded in his lap with the same composure he'd worn through hostile board meetings and million-dollar negotiations. 32 years old, 6'2", tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Hair still thick and dark, jaw still sharp, body still strong. He looked like a man who'd just stepped out of a Fortune magazine cover shoot, not a man receiving a death sentence. Dr. Morrison's mouth was moving. Words tumbled out: lymphoma, stage 4, aggressive, metastasized. The older man's face had that careful blankness doctors practiced when delivering bad news, like he was reading stock prices instead of telling someone their life was ending. "How long?" Ethan asked. His voice didn't shake. Dr. Morrison's pen clicked against his clipboard. Once. Twice. With treatment, maybe 6 months. Without it. The doctor's eyebrows lifted. "Mr. Vale, I understand this is shocking, but there are options. Chemotherapy won't cure it, but it could buy you time." Time for what? Ethan leaned back, and something like a smile crossed his face. It wasn't happy. To feel like death while I'm dying? To spend my last months vomiting in hospital beds while my daughter watches me turn into a stranger? Dr. Morrison set down his clipboard. "Your daughter, how old is she?" 7. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. "Then you owe it to her to fight," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "Even a few more months. I owe her a father who's present for the time I have left." Ethan stood, buttoning his suit jacket with mechanical precision. Not a ghost hooked up to tubes. Too sick to hold her hand. "How long without treatment?" The doctor's shoulders sagged. 3 weeks, maybe 4. "Then I have 3 weeks to put my affairs in order." Ethan walked out of that office the same way he'd walked into it, back straight, face composed, every inch the self-made billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing. He made it to his car before his hands started shaking, made it home before the composure cracked, made it to his daughter's bedroom door before he fell apart completely. Lily was asleep, her small body curled around a stuffed rabbit he'd bought her in Paris last year. 7 years old with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She still believed he could fix anything, still ran to him when she was scared, still thought he was invincible. How the hell was he supposed to tell her he was dying? Ethan pressed his forehead against the doorframe, eyes burning. His wife Sarah had been gone for 3 years now. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday that had ripped his world in half. Lily had been 4. Too young to understand why mommy wasn't coming home. Old enough to hurt like hell anyway. And now she'd lose him too. He wanted to scream, wanted to put his fist through a wall. Wanted to rage at the unfairness of it all. 32 years old, healthy as a horse, until 6 months ago when the fatigue started, when the night sweats began, when his body betrayed him without warning. Instead, he watched his daughter sleep and tried to memorize the moment, the way her hair spread across the pillow, the soft sound of her breathing, the complete trust in her relaxed face. 3 weeks. He had 3 weeks to make sure she'd be okay when he was gone. The next morning, Ethan stood in front of his closet holding a pair of jeans he hadn't worn in 5 years. "Daddy?" Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rabbit clutched under one arm. "Why are you wearing old clothes?" He turned, forcing a smile. "I'm going on a little trip today, sweetheart. Somewhere I need to blend in." "Blend in where?" "One of our restaurants, but I don't want anyone to know it's me." Her nose wrinkled. "Why not? You own it." "Sometimes," Ethan said, pulling on a plain gray hoodie that hung looser than it should have, "you learn more when people think you're nobody special." Lily processed this with the seriousness she applied to everything. "Like a spy?" "Exactly like a spy." "Cool." She climbed onto his bed, bouncing slightly. "Can I come?" The reflex to say yes was immediate and powerful. He wanted to take her everywhere, do everything, squeeze a lifetime into 3 weeks. But he also knew what he was about to do. Walk into Vale's Crown, his flagship restaurant in downtown Seattle, and see what his empire really looked like when he wasn't around to monitor it. And he had a feeling he wasn't going to like what he found. "Not this time, princess, but I promise we'll do something fun this weekend, whatever you want." "Anything?" "Anything." Lily's grin was pure mischief. "Ice cream for breakfast?" Ethan laughed, the sound rough but genuine. "Push it, kid." After he dropped Lily at school, hugging her tighter than usual, ignoring the curious look from her teacher, Ethan drove to Vale's Crown wearing the anonymity of ordinary clothes. No designer suit, no luxury car. He'd borrowed his housekeeper's 10-year-old Honda, parked 3 blocks away, and walked the rest. It felt strange, liberating and terrifying at once. Vale's Crown occupied the ground floor of a sleek high-rise in the heart of the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern architecture, interior design that had cost $250,000. The restaurant had opened 5 years ago to critical acclaim, upscale comfort food with a focus on local ingredients, impeccable service, an atmosphere that managed to be both elegant and welcoming. Or at least that's what the reviews said. Ethan hadn't actually eaten there as a customer in over 2 years. He came for board meetings in the private dining room upstairs, reviewed financial reports from his office across town, approved menu changes via email. He trusted his management team to maintain his vision. Now, standing outside in jeans and a hoodie, watching well-dressed customers filter through the entrance, he wondered if that trust had been misplaced. The lunch rush was just beginning. Ethan pushed through the doors and was immediately struck by how different everything felt from ground level. As the owner arriving for a meeting, he'd been greeted by name, ushered to the best table, treated like royalty. Now dressed like a regular guy, he might as well have been invisible. No hostess appeared. The stand near the entrance sat empty. Reservation book open but unattended. Ethan stood there for nearly 5 minutes before a harried-looking young woman rushed past carrying a stack of menus. Excuse me," Ethan said. She barely glanced at him. "Someone will be with you." Then she was gone, disappearing into the dining room. Ethan's jaw tightened. He scanned the interior with new eyes. Tables were full, which was good, but several diners looked annoyed, checking their watches. A couple near the window was trying to flag down a server who breezed past without acknowledging them. At a foretop in the corner, empty plates had been sitting for what looked like a while, the guests clearly ready for their check. This wasn't the operation he'd built. This was sloppy, careless. Finally, another hostess emerged from somewhere in the back. She looked at Ethan with undisguised boredom. "Help you?" "Table for one?" She sighed like he'd asked her to donate a kidney. "It'll be a wait." "How long?" 20, 30 minutes. She didn't check the reservation book, didn't offer to put his name down. Ethan glanced at the dining room again. He could see at least 3 tables that had just been vacated and not yet cleared. "Looks like you have some open spots." "Those need to be bussed." "Right, so maybe 20 to 30 minutes, she repeated, already looking past him toward the door. This was the hospitality he'd insisted on? The standard his managers swore they were maintaining? Ethan felt anger building in his chest, hot and sharp. He wanted to tear off the disguise, reveal who he was, watch everyone scramble to fix their attitudes. But that wouldn't tell him anything useful. People always performed when the boss was watching. He wanted to see what they did when they thought no one important was looking. "I'll wait," he said. The hostess shrugged and walked away without another word. Ethan moved to the waiting area near the bar, positioning himself where he could observe without being obvious. What he saw over the next half hour made his blood pressure climb steadily higher. The bartender was on his phone more than he was serving drinks. A server walked past 3 different tables where guests were clearly trying to get his attention, earbuds in, completely checked out. The bussers moved like they were underwater, taking their time clearing tables while new customers piled up at the entrance. And the manager, Ethan recognized him from staff photos, a guy named Derek Hansen who'd been promoted 6 months ago, was leaning against the bar talking to a blonde server, laughing, completely oblivious to the chaos around him. Or worse, completely unconcerned. Ethan pulled out his phone and started taking notes. Names, behaviors, the time it took for tables to be cleared, the number of customers who left without being seated. 45 minutes later, he was finally shown to a table, not by the hostess who'd promised 30 minutes, but by a different server who looked exhausted and apologetic. "Sorry about the wait," she said quietly, setting down a menu. Her name tag read Clara. "We're a little short-staffed today." Ethan looked at her properly for the first time. Mid-20s, maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup except a swipe of something on her lips. She had the kind of face that was easy to overlook. Not striking, not memorable, just quietly pretty in a way that didn't demand attention. But her eyes were kind. Genuinely kind. "It's fine," Ethan said, and was surprised to find he meant it, at least when talking to her. Clara's smile was small and tired. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Coffee, please. Black." "I'll be right back." She moved through the dining room with quiet efficiency, not rushing, but not wasting time either. Ethan watched her stop at another table where an elderly couple looked confused about the menu. Instead of rattling off specials and walking away, Clara crouched down slightly to be at their eye level, explained the options patiently, made recommendations based on what they seemed to like. The old man smiled at her. "You're a sweetheart." Clara's cheeks went pink. "Just doing my job, sir." But it wasn't just a job. Ethan could see it in the way she moved, the way she paid attention. She actually cared. In this place where half the staff was sleepwalking through their shifts, here was someone who gave a damn about the customers. She returned with his coffee, and Ethan noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "You okay?" he asked. Clara looked startled that he'd noticed. "Oh yes, sorry, long day. It's barely past noon." A flicker of something crossed her face. Exhaustion, maybe frustration, before she smoothed it away. "Can I take your order?" Ethan ordered the lunch special without looking at the menu. He knew what it was supposed to be: seared salmon with seasonal vegetables and herb risotto, one of their signature dishes. What arrived 20 minutes later was a disappointment. The salmon was overcooked. The vegetables were limp. The risotto was gummy and under-seasoned. This wasn't the food his chefs were trained to produce. This was garbage. Clara appeared at his elbow. "How is everything?" Ethan looked up at her. The honest answer was terrible. The answer that would get attention. Still terrible, but louder. The answer he gave, "It's fine." Because he wasn't here to complain as a customer. He was here to investigate as an owner. But Clara didn't move away. She glanced at his plate, barely touched, and her expression shifted to something like concern. "Is it really fine?" There was no judgment in her voice, just genuine curiosity about whether he was being honest. Ethan found himself saying, "The salmon's overdone. The risotto needs salt." He expected her to get defensive, to make excuses. Instead, she frowned at the plate like it had personally offended her. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "The kitchen's been off today. Can I get you something else? On the house." "That's not necessary. Please. I'd feel better." And the thing was, Ethan believed her. She actually would feel better if she could fix this. Not because of tips or customer satisfaction scores, but because she cared about doing things right. "Just the coffee's fine," he said. "But thank you." Clara nodded and cleared his plate, still looking troubled. When she brought the check 20 minutes later, Ethan noticed she'd comped his entire meal, not just offered a replacement. He left a $100 tip on a $15 tab. Ethan spent the next week returning to Vale's Crown in different disguises, at different times, building a complete picture of what was happening. And the more he saw, the angrier he got. Derek Hansen, the manager, was running the place into the ground. He showed up late, left early, and spent most of his time hitting on the younger female staff. When he was on the floor, he treated customers like interruptions and employees like servants. The kitchen was understaffed because Derek kept cutting hours to pad his budget numbers. The bartender was Derek's buddy, which meant he got away with doing minimal work. The hostess, who'd been so rude. Derek's girlfriend. And the whole operation was hemorrhaging money through waste, theft, and sheer incompetence. But the worst part, the part that made Ethan's hands curl into fists, was how Derek treated Clara. He watched Derek cut her shifts from 5 days to 3 because we're overstaffed. Watched him give her the worst sections, the most difficult customers, the least support. watched him ignore her when she tried to report problems, and mock her when she stayed late to help close, even though she wasn't getting paid for it. "Why do you even try?" another server asked Clara one night when Ethan was sitting at the bar, pretending to watch a basketball game. "Derek doesn't give a shit." Clara's voice was quiet but firm. "The customers aren't Derek's. They deserve better." The other server rolled her eyes and walked away. But Ethan sat there, staring at his beer, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. This woman, this shy, overlooked waitress who probably made poverty wages and got treated like dirt by her manager, had more integrity in her little finger than most of his executives had in their entire bodies. He wanted to know more about her. That was dangerous, and he knew it. He was a dying man with 3 weeks left. Getting involved in anyone's life was selfish and stupid. But Ethan had built his empire by taking risks, and something about Clara Hayes made him want to take one more. So he started staying later, ordering dessert, lingering over coffee, finding excuses to be in the restaurant when it was slower, when he could actually talk to her. "You're here a lot," Clara observed one evening, refilling his coffee cup for the third time. There was no accusation in her tone, just friendly observation. "I like the coffee," Ethan said. She smiled slightly. "The coffee's terrible." "Okay, you got me. I like the company." Clara's cheeks went pink again, and she glanced around like she was checking to see if anyone had heard. "I should probably get back to work." "Wait." Ethan didn't know what made him say it. "What time do you get off?" Her eyes widened slightly. 11. "Can I buy you a drink or coffee?" "Real coffee, not this terrible stuff." Clara looked torn between surprise and suspicion. "I don't really know you." "My name's Eli," Ethan said, using the nickname only his wife had ever called him. "I'm new to the city. I work in tech. I'm terrible at making friends, and I think you seem like someone worth knowing." It was more honesty than he'd planned to give, and it was all technically true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. Clara hesitated. I don't really go out with customers." "Then go out with Eli. Not a customer, just a guy who's asking." She bit her lip, considering. Up close, Ethan could see she had dark circles under her eyes, could see the exhaustion written into every line of her body, could see someone who probably never did anything for herself. "Just coffee," she said finally, "and somewhere public." Done. They went to a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away. Terrible coffee again, but better company than Ethan had experienced in years. Clara sat across from him in a vinyl booth, wrapping her hands around a chipped mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Out of her work uniform, in jeans and an oversized sweater, she looked even younger, more vulnerable. "So," she said. "Tech, huh? What do you do?" Ethan had prepared for this. "Software development. Boring stuff. Databases and back-end architecture." "Sounds complicated." "It's really not. Just a lot of problem solving." He stirred sugar into coffee that didn't need it. "What about you? Have you worked at Vale's Crown long?" 2 years, Clara made a face. "It used to be better. The management changed about 6 months ago, and everything went downhill." "The manager seems like a piece of work." "Derek's awful," she said bluntly, then looked surprised at herself for saying it out loud. "Sorry, I shouldn't talk about work." "Why not? I'm not going to tell anyone." Clara studied him for a moment, like she was trying to figure out if he was trustworthy. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she sighed and said, "He cut my hours this week. Said we're overstaffed, but really he just wants to hire his friends and girlfriend. I went from 40 hours to 24. I can't afford rent on 24 hours. Ethan felt that hot anger rising again. "Can you report him to someone higher up?" "Like who? The owner?" Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mr. Vale doesn't know I exist. He's some billionaire who probably hasn't set foot in that restaurant in years. Derek does whatever he wants." The irony of it hit Ethan hard. Here he was, sitting across from her, and she had no idea she was talking to the man who could fix everything with one phone call. But if he revealed himself now, this moment would end. She'd stop being honest, would start seeing him as the billionaire instead of Eli, the guy who'd asked her for coffee. "So what are you going to do?" he asked instead. Clara stared into her mug. "Find another job, I guess. Except I can't quit until I have something lined up, and I barely have time to look because I'm working 2 jobs as it is. 2 jobs? Waitressing and cleaning offices downtown, 3 nights a week. She looked embarrassed. I need the money. Ethan wanted to ask why. Wanted to understand what circumstances had put this kind, hardworking woman in a position where she was running herself into the ground for poverty wages. But he could see she was already regretting telling him this much. That sounds exhausting, he said quietly. It is. Clara's voice went soft. But I don't really have a choice. My dad... She stopped, jaw tightening. Sorry, you don't want to hear about this. I do. She looked at him like she couldn't quite believe that, like kindness was something foreign and suspicious. My dad's sick, she said finally. Cancer. He's in hospice care. It's expensive, even with insurance. So I work, and I pay the bills, and I try not to think about what happens when... Her voice cracked. Ethan's chest constricted. Cancer. Hospice. A daughter working herself to death trying to save her father. He knew that story. He was living a version of it from the other side. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Clara wiped at her eyes quickly. God, I'm sorry, I don't usually dump on strangers like this. We're not strangers anymore. We're people who've had terrible coffee together. That's basically friendship. She laughed, watery but genuine. You're weird, Eli. I get that a lot. They talked for another hour. Claire told him about growing up in Seattle, about her dad who'd raised her alone after her mom left when she was 10, about the dream she'd had once, college, maybe art school, something creative, that had gotten buried under bills and responsibility. Ethan told her half-truths, that he'd lost his wife 3 years ago, that he had a daughter he loved more than anything, that he was trying to figure out what mattered in life. All of it was true. None of it was complete. When he drove her home, she'd protested, but he'd insisted. Clara paused before getting out of the borrowed Honda. Thank you, she said. For tonight, I needed it. Any time. She smiled, small and shy. You mean that? Yeah, I really do. After she disappeared into a run-down apartment building that made Ethan's heart hurt, he sat in the car for a long time, staring at nothing. 3 weeks to live. And he'd just met someone who made him want more time. The next morning, Ethan walked into Vale's Crown through the back entrance, wearing his suit again, every inch the billionaire owner. Derek Hansen nearly dropped his clipboard when he saw him. Mr. Vale, we weren't expecting... if I'd known you were coming... We need to talk, Ethan said coldly. In the office. Now. 10 minutes later, Derek was unemployed. Ethan didn't shout, didn't make a scene. Just laid out the evidence he'd gathered. The theft, the sexual harassment complaints Derek had buried, the budget manipulation, the toxic management style, and watched the man's face go from red to white to gray. You're done, Ethan said. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out. Derek sputtered. You can't just... I'll sue. You can try. My lawyers are better than yours. Ethan leaned back in the chair. And Derek? If you so much as breathe near my employees again, I'll make sure everyone in this industry knows exactly what kind of manager you are. Get out. After Derek left, escorted by security, face purple with rage, Ethan called an emergency staff meeting. The employees filed into the dining room looking nervous and confused. Ethan stood at the front, studying their faces. Most he recognized from his undercover visits. A few looked relieved, others looked scared. Claire was in the back, eyes wide. I owe you all an apology, Ethan said. No preamble, no corporate speak. I trusted the wrong person to run this restaurant, and he failed you. He failed our customers. He failed the standards I built this place on. That ends today. He outlined the changes. New management, someone from his flagship location across town who actually knew what they were doing. Better scheduling, fair treatment, a return to the values Vale's Crown was supposed to represent. And for those of you who had your hours cut, Ethan said, looking directly at Clara, even though she didn't know he was talking to her specifically, you'll be restored to your full schedules, effective immediately, with back pay for what you lost. Relief rippled through the crowd. Clara's hand went to her mouth. Ethan continued for another 10 minutes, taking questions, making promises he intended to keep. But his eyes kept drifting back to Clara, standing in the back, looking like she couldn't quite believe this was real. When the meeting ended, staff filtered out in small groups, buzzing with cautious optimism. Clara lingered, like she wanted to say something but didn't know if she should. Ethan made the decision for her. "Clara Hayes," he said, walking over. She straightened, nervous. "Yes, sir?" "I've heard good things about your work. The new manager will want to talk to you about a possible promotion to lead server. Interested?" Her eyes went huge. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Vale." She didn't recognize him. Why would she? Eli had worn a hood, glasses, grown out his stubble, had been just another customer. But Ethan Vale in a suit, clean-shaven, commanding a room, he was a different person entirely. And he was going to keep it that way. Because what he was about to do was selfish and probably wrong, but he was doing it anyway. He was going to keep seeing her as Eli. Keep building something real with someone who saw him as just a man, not a dying billionaire. He'd fix her problems from the shadows, give her the stability she needed, and let her keep her dignity. And if it ended badly, when it ended badly, because it would, at least he'd have had this. One last chance to be loved for who he was instead of what he owned. Ethan Vale was running out of time, but Eli had just begun. Over the next week, Ethan lived two lives. By day, he was dad to Lily. They went to the aquarium, made pancakes shaped like dolphins, read stories until she fell asleep in his lap. He took 1,000 mental pictures, trying to memorize her laughter, her questions, the way she still believed in magic. He also put his affairs in order with surgical precision, updated his will, established trusts for Lily's education and care, made videos for every birthday she'd have without him, every milestone he'd miss, wrote letters she wouldn't read until she was older, trying to compress a lifetime of fatherly advice into words that felt desperately inadequate. His lawyer looked at him with undisguised concern. "Ethan, this is very thorough, but are you sure?" "I'm sure," Ethan said. "Just make sure it's ironclad. I need to know she'll be taken care of." By night, he was Eli. He met Clara for coffee again, then dinner, then a walk through Pike Place Market, where she showed him her favorite spots, the flower stalls, the buskers, the hidden bookstore in the alley where she used to spend hours before her life got too busy for things like reading for pleasure. "I wanted to be an artist," she told him one evening, standing in front of a street painter's display. "Specifically, I wanted to illustrate children's books. I used to draw all the time, made up stories, created characters." She smiled sadly. "Stupid dream." "Why is it stupid?" "Because it doesn't pay bills, because my dad needed me, because life doesn't care about dreams." Ethan wanted to tell her that he could make that dream happen, could fund her art education, buy her time, give her everything she'd sacrificed. But that wasn't something Eli could offer. That was Ethan Vale territory. And Eli was supposed to be a guy who worked in tech and drove a Honda. So instead he said, "It's not stupid, and maybe when things settle down—" "They won't settle down," Clara interrupted quietly. "My dad's dying, Eli. The doctors say he has maybe a month. After that, I'll be dealing with funeral costs and his debts and trying to figure out how to exist in a world where I don't have him anymore." She looked at the paintings without really seeing them. "There's no settling down. There's just surviving." Ethan knew that feeling, knew it in his bones. "I'm dying too," he heard himself say. Clara's head whipped toward him. "What?" He hadn't planned to tell her, hadn't planned to make this real, but looking at her sad eyes and tired face, he couldn't keep lying, not completely. "I have cancer," Ethan said. The words felt like stones. "Stage 4 lymphoma. The doctors gave me a few weeks, maybe a month." Clara stared at him like he'd just spoken another language. But you seem fine. You don't look—" "Not yet, but I will." Ethan shoved his hands in his pockets. "I'm not doing treatment. I have a daughter. I'd rather spend the time I have left being her dad than being sick." "Oh my God." Clara's hand covered her mouth. "Eli, I'm so sorry. I've been complaining about my problems, and you—" "Don't." He caught her hand, squeezed it. "Your problems are real. Your pain matters. Don't apologize for being human." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "This is so unfair." "Yeah, it really is." They stood there in the market, surrounded by noise and life and people who had futures, two people who were running out of time. And when Clara stepped forward and hugged him, really hugged him, Holding on like she could keep him alive through sheer force of will, Ethan closed his eyes and let himself have it. Just for a moment. Just for now. After that night, everything changed. They started spending every evening together. Clara would finish her shift at Vale's Crown, and Eli would be waiting. Sometimes they went out. Sometimes they just sat in his car and talked. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just existed in each other's company, finding comfort and shared understanding. "What are you most afraid of?" Clara asked one night, sitting beside him on a bench overlooking Elliott Bay. Ethan considered lying, considered deflecting, but there was something about Clara that pulled truth from him. "That my daughter won't remember me," he said. "She's 7. How many memories do you have from when you were 7? "Not many," Clara admitted. "Exactly. In 10 years, I'll be a handful of photographs and stories other people tell her. She won't remember my voice. Won't remember how I used to make her pancakes on Sunday mornings, or how I'd let her fall asleep on my shoulder when we watched movies." His throat tightened. "I'm terrified of becoming a ghost to my own kid." Clara was quiet for a long time. Then, "My mom left when I was 10. I barely remember her face now, but I remember how she smelled, like lavender and cigarettes. I remember she used to hum when she cooked. I remember she had this laugh that sounded like wind chimes." She looked at Eli. "The memories won't be complete, but they'll be there. The important ones stick." "You think so?" "I know so. Because you love her. That kind of love leaves marks, good ones." Ethan wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. "What about you?" he asked. "What are you afraid of?" Clara hugged her knees. "Being alone. My whole life has been about taking care of my dad. After he's gone, I don't know who I am anymore. Don't know what I'm supposed to do with myself." She laughed bitterly. "Isn't that pathetic? I'm 30 years old and I've built my entire identity around being someone's daughter. It's not pathetic, it's love. Love that's about to leave me empty." Ethan understood that too. When Sarah died, he'd felt like someone had scooped out his insides and left him hollow. Only Lily had kept him going, given him purpose. Without her, he didn't let himself finish that thought. "We should do something reckless," he said suddenly. Clara blinked. "What?" "We're dying. Both of us, one way or another. We should do something completely ridiculous and irresponsible before we can't anymore." "Like what?" Ethan thought about it. What did a dying billionaire pretending to be a tech worker do for excitement? What could he offer her that was genuine, that didn't rely on his money or status? "When's the last time you left the city?" he asked. "Years. I can't afford to travel." "What if I told you I have access to a cabin in the mountains? My boss lets employees use it sometimes." A lie, but a useful one. Ethan did have a cabin, one of several properties, and no one would question him taking it for a weekend. "We could go. Just for 2 days? No work, no hospitals, no dying parents. Just us and trees and quiet." Clara looked tempted and terrified. "I can't just leave my dad. Does he have care?" "The hospice nurses, but call them. Make sure he's covered. If he is, come with me, please." She bit her lip, torn. "Clara," Ethan said gently, "when's the last time you did something just for yourself?" She couldn't answer that. Maybe because there wasn't an answer. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, let's be reckless." The cabin sat 2 hours north of Seattle, tucked into a forest so thick with evergreens that sunlight had to fight its way through. Ethan had called ahead to have it stocked. Groceries, firewood, basics, using a service that wouldn't ask questions. He'd told Clara his boss kept it ready for employees, and she'd believed him because why wouldn't she? Eli was just a tech guy borrowing his company's perk. They arrived Friday evening as the sun was bleeding orange through the trees. Clara stepped out of the Honda and just stood there, breathing in air that didn't taste like exhaust and stress. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. Ethan grabbed their bags from the trunk. His hands were shaking slightly, not from exertion, but from the conversation he'd had with Lily's nanny before leaving. Margaret had looked at him with those knowing eyes and said, "You're getting weaker. I can see it." He'd deflected, made jokes, promised he'd be back Sunday and would rest then. But Margaret wasn't stupid, and the truth was written all over his face. He was running out of time faster than expected. The fatigue was getting worse, the weight loss more noticeable. He'd started having moments where his vision grayed at the edges, where his heart stuttered in his chest like it was forgetting how to beat. 2 weeks, maybe, if he was lucky. "You okay?" Clara was watching him with concern. Ethan forced a smile. "Just tired from the drive. Come on, let's get inside before it gets dark." The cabin was exactly as he'd left it 6 months ago, before the diagnosis, before his world had collapsed into a countdown. Open floor plan, stone fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the woods. Comfortable furniture that didn't try too hard. A kitchen stocked with more food than 2 people could eat in a weekend. Clara walked through it slowly, touching things like she was afraid they'd disappear. "Your boss must really like you." "He's all right," Ethan said, setting down the bags. "Sometimes he's an ass who works too much and forgets what matters. But he's learning." She turned, eyebrow raised. "Sounds like you're friends." Something like that. Clara moved to the windows, pressing her palm against the glass. In the fading light, her reflection looked fragile. Ethan wanted to wrap his arms around her, wanted to promise her everything would be okay, but he was done making promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he said, "I'm going to start a fire. You hungry?" "Starving, actually." They cooked together, pasta with vegetables and garlic bread that filled the cabin with smells that reminded Ethan of better times. Sarah had loved to cook. She'd turned their kitchen into chaos, flour everywhere, music blasting, dancing between the stove and cutting board like cooking was a full-contact sport. Ethan had been the one who cleaned up, who organized, who made sure things didn't burn. Clara cooked the way she did everything else, quietly, carefully, paying attention to details. She didn't talk much while she worked, just moved through the motions with practiced efficiency. But when Ethan handed her a glass of wine and she took a sip, her shoulders finally dropped from where they'd been hunched near her ears. "Thank you for this," she said. "I didn't realize how much I needed to get away." "You called the hospice? Your dad's okay?" "He's fine. The nurse said he's been sleeping a lot today. She'll call if anything changes." Clara stared into her wine. "It's weird, you know? I spend every day terrified of losing him, but also kind of waiting for it to happen. Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you human," Ethan said. "Grief doesn't wait until someone dies. You've been losing him for months." "Yeah," her voice cracked. "I have." They ate dinner on the couch in front of the fire, plates balanced on their knees, not talking about anything heavy. Clara told him about the customer who'd tried to send back a medium-rare steak because it was too pink in the middle, and Ethan laughed until his ribs hurt. He told her about the time Lily had decided to give herself a haircut and ended up looking like a very angry dandelion. "You didn't fix it?" Clara asked, grinning. She was so proud of herself. "How could I tell her it looked insane?" Ethan shook his head. "I took her to school like that. Her teacher didn't say anything, but I could see the judgment. Good dad move. Or terrible parenting. Hard to tell." Clara set down her plate and curled into the corner of the couch, wine glass cradled in both hands. The firelight caught in her hair, turned her eyes soft. She looked younger like this, less burdened. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything." "Why didn't you tell me sooner? About being sick?" Ethan had known this question was coming, had rehearsed answers in his head. But sitting here, looking at her open face, he found himself going off script. "Because I wanted to be normal," he said. "When people know you're dying, they treat you different. They get careful, start looking at you like you're already a ghost. I just wanted someone to see me as Eli, regular guy, nothing special, instead of the dying guy they have to handle with gloves." Clara's eyes glistened. "You're not nothing special. I'm really not that interesting. You're interesting to me." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither of them knew how to unpack. Ethan set down his own glass and shifted closer, close enough to see the pulse jumping in Clara's throat. "Clara, don't," she interrupted. "Don't tell me this is a bad idea or that we shouldn't because we're both dealing with too much. I know all that. I've thought about nothing else since you told me you were sick." She put down her wine with deliberate care. "But I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of doing the right thing and swallowing my feelings and pretending I don't want something for myself." "What do you want?" "I want to stop thinking for one night. I want to feel something good instead of just sad and scared. and exhausted. She looked at him directly. "I want you to kiss me." Ethan's heart was hammering. This was crossing a line he'd told himself he wouldn't cross. Clara didn't know who he really was, didn't know he'd orchestrated her schedule change, didn't know he was the billionaire owner watching her from behind a mask. When she found out, and she would find out, this would hurt so much worse. But he was dying, and she was here. And maybe they both deserved one night where the world wasn't ending. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. She didn't. When his lips met hers, Clara made a small sound in the back of her throat and reached for him, fingers curling into his shirt. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people testing whether this was real or just desperation wearing romance's clothes. Then Clara's hands moved to his face, and the kiss deepened, and Ethan stopped thinking about consequences, stopped thinking about anything except the woman in his arms who tasted like wine and hope. They pulled apart eventually, breathing hard. Clara's face was flushed, her lips swollen. "Stay with me tonight," Ethan said. "Just to sleep. I just want to hold you." She nodded, not trusting her voice. They cleaned up the dinner mess together in comfortable silence, shoulders bumping, hands brushing. Then Clara disappeared into the bathroom while Ethan banked the fire and tried to calm his racing pulse. When she emerged wearing sleep shorts and an oversized t-shirt, hair down around her shoulders, he forgot how to breathe. They climbed into the cabin's massive bed, king-sized, ridiculous for two people, and Clara immediately curled into his side like she'd been doing it for years. Ethan wrapped his arm around her, feeling her heartbeat against his ribs, and thought, "This is what I've been missing. Not sex, not passion, just this. Simple human connection, someone who wanted to be close to him without agenda or expectation." "Eli?" Clara's voice was sleepy. "Yeah? I'm glad I met you, even if—" She stopped. "I'm just glad." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "Me too." He lay awake long after Clara's breathing evened out into sleep, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his lies pressing down. He should tell her, should sit her down tomorrow and explain everything, who he really was, what he'd done, why he'd hidden behind a fake name and borrowed car. But tomorrow, they'd have to go back to reality. Back to dying parents and terminal diagnoses and borrowed time. Tonight, he could just be Eli, and that would have to be enough. Morning came too bright and too early. Ethan woke to find Clara already up, standing at the window with coffee, watching deer pick their way through the underbrush. She'd put on jeans and a sweater, and her hair was twisted into a messy bun that made her look like she belonged in this place. "Hey," he said, voice rough with sleep. She turned, smiling. "Hey yourself. I made coffee. It's actually terrible, but I made it. My favorite kind." They spent the morning hiking a trail that wound through the forest. Clara talked about her childhood, the good parts, before her mom left and money got tight. She'd grown up in a small house near Green Lake, spent summers riding her bike until the streetlights came on, had a best friend named Amy who'd moved to Portland and they'd lost touch. "I used to draw her," Clara said, stepping over a fallen log. "Amy and me as superheroes saving the world. She could fly and I could turn invisible." She laughed. "Guess I got my wish on that one. I'm pretty good at being invisible now." "I see you," Ethan said. Clara glanced back at him. "I know you do. That's the weird part." They stopped for lunch at a clearing with a view of mountains that looked like they'd been painted onto the sky. Clara unpacked the sandwiches they'd thrown together, and Ethan watched her move, memorizing the details. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident, the unconscious habit she had of biting her bottom lip when she was thinking. "You're staring," Clara said without looking up. "Sorry." "Don't be." She handed him a sandwich. "It's nice being looked at like that." "Like what?" "Like I matter." Ethan's chest tightened. "You do matter, Clara. You matter so much." She met his eyes and something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition. Two people who'd been invisible in different ways, finding each other in the space between living and dying. "Tell me about your daughter," Clara said, changing the subject before the emotion could overwhelm them both. So Ethan did. He talked about Lily until his voice went hoarse. her obsession with marine biology, her collection of weird facts about octopuses, the way she still slept with the stuffed rabbit he'd bought her in Paris. He told Clara about the videos he was making, the letters he was writing, the desperate attempt to leave pieces of himself behind. "She sounds amazing," Clara said quietly. "She is. She's the best thing I ever made." Ethan stared at the mountains. "I keep trying to figure out how to say goodbye to her. How do you tell a 7-year-old that her dad is dying, that she's going to lose another parent? I don't think there's a good way." "No, there really isn't." They sat in silence for a while, eating sandwiches that tasted like cardboard, watching clouds rearrange themselves across the sky. Then Clara said, "My dad doesn't know I'm here." "Did you tell the hospice nurse not to mention it?" "No, I mean, he doesn't know about you, about any of this." She picked at the crust of her bread. "He's so sick now, barely conscious most of the time. But on his good days, he asks about my life. Wants to know if I'm taking care of myself, if I have friends, if I'm happy. And I lie. Tell him everything's fine." "Why?" "Because he's dying, and he's scared I'll be alone. If he knew I was struggling, that I'm barely holding it together and working 2 jobs and have no life outside of taking care of him." Clara's voice broke. "It would kill him faster." Ethan reached over and took her hand. "You're not going to be alone." "Yes, I will. That's what happens. Parents die, friends drift away, and you wake up one day realizing you built your whole world around someone who's gone." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm not ready." "Nobody ever is." Clara turned to look at him fully. "Are you? Ready, I mean." Was he? Ethan didn't know how to answer that. He'd made his peace with dying, had spent the last week checking off his list, putting everything in order. But ready? No. He'd never be ready to leave Lily, never be ready to miss her first day of high school, her graduation, her wedding. Never be ready to become a photograph and a story. "No," he said honestly. "I'm not ready at all." They hiked back to the cabin as the sun started its descent, not talking much, just existing together in the strange peace of mutual understanding. 2 people standing at the edge of the void, holding hands so they wouldn't fall alone. That night, Clara cooked again. Chicken and roasted vegetables that actually tasted good. They ate on the couch with another fire crackling, and Ethan found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't since the diagnosis. Out here, with no one watching, no role to play, he could just be. "I need to tell you something," Clara said suddenly, setting down her fork. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Okay." "I called my dad earlier while you were in the shower." She twisted her napkin in her hands. "I wanted to check on him, make sure he was all right, and he was awake. Really awake, for the first time in days." "That's good, isn't it?" "I told him about you." Clara looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I know I said I was keeping secrets, but I couldn't lie to him anymore. So I told him I met someone kind and funny and dying just like he is. And you know what he said?" Ethan shook his head. He said, "Good. Don't waste time being careful. Love him while you can." The tears spilled over. "My dad, who spent my whole life teaching me to be cautious, to think things through, to protect myself, he told me to love you." The word hung in the air like a grenade. Love. They'd been dancing around it for days, maybe longer, but hearing it said out loud made it real, made it dangerous. "Clara, I know it's fast, I know it's insane. We've known each other for what, 2 weeks?" She laughed wetly. "But time's different when you're running out of it. Everything's compressed. I feel like I've known you forever and also like I'm just starting to figure you out." Ethan set down his own plate and pulled her close. She came willingly, burying her face in his shoulder, shaking with the force of emotion she'd been holding back. "I'm falling in love with you," she whispered into his shirt. "I know I shouldn't. I know it's going to hurt like hell when you're gone, but I can't help it. He should stop this. Should tell her the truth right now before it got worse." But the words stuck in his throat, and instead he heard himself say, "I'm falling in love with you too." Clara pulled back just enough to look at him. "Yeah?" "Yeah. Definitely. Completely." Ethan cupped her face in his hands. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time, Clara Hayes." She kissed him then, harder than last night, more desperate, like she was trying to pour everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips. Ethan kissed her back with equal intensity, and this time when they pulled apart, there was no hesitation. "Take me to bed," Clara said. "Not to sleep. Really take me to bed." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." They stumbled to the bedroom, kissing between steps, pulling at clothes. And when they finally fell into the sheets together, skin against skin, Ethan felt something inside him shift. This wasn't just physical. This was connection. This was two people who understood that tomorrow wasn't guaranteed, trying to hold on to something good. Afterward, they lay tangled together, catching their breath. Clara traced patterns on Ethan's chest, following old scars. "Where'd you get this one?" she asked, finger pausing on a thin white line near his collarbone. Ethan's mind raced. The real answer? A skiing accident in Aspen when he was 19. But would Eli have gone skiing in Aspen? "Fell off my bike as a kid," he lied. "Went over the handlebars into a fence." Ouch. "Yeah, it was pretty stupid." Clara's hand moved lower, finding another mark near his ribs. "And this?" "Appendix surgery." That one was true, at least. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying him. "You're full of stories, Eli." "Everyone is. You just have to ask." "Okay, then." Clara settled back against his shoulder. "Tell me a story. Something real. Something you've never told anyone else." Ethan stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his deception pressing down. He wanted to tell her everything, wanted to strip away all the lies and just be honest. But the truth was complicated and messy and would ruin this perfect moment. So he told her a truth, just not the whole truth. "When my wife died," he said slowly, "I didn't cry at the funeral. Everyone thought I was being strong for Lily, holding it together so she wouldn't fall apart. But the real reason was that I couldn't believe it was real. I kept expecting Sarah to walk through the door and tell me it was all a mistake." Clara's hand found his, squeezed. "It took 3 months before I finally broke down," Ethan continued. "Lily was at a friend's house. I was alone in our bedroom, packing up Sarah's clothes to donate. And I found this shirt, just a regular t-shirt, nothing special, but it still smelled like her perfume, and I just..." His voice cracked. "I lost it. Completely fell apart. Sat on the floor holding that stupid shirt and cried until I couldn't breathe." "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. "The thing is, I still have that shirt. I know I'm supposed to let go, move on, all that grief counselor bullshit, but I can't. It's in the back of my closet, and sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I take it out and just..." He stopped, surprised by how much this still hurt. "I just hold it." Clara turned his face toward hers. "That's not pathetic. That's love." "It feels pathetic." "Well, it's not." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for telling me." They lay there in the dark, listening to the wind move through the trees outside. Ethan felt Clara's breathing even out, felt her body grow heavy against his. But he couldn't sleep. His mind was spinning with guilt and fear and the growing certainty that he was making a terrible mistake. He needed to tell her, tomorrow, as soon as they got back to the city. But tomorrow came faster than expected. Clara's phone rang at 3 a.m, shattering the quiet. She jerked awake, fumbling for it on the nightstand. "Hello?" Her voice was thick with sleep. Then, "What? When? Is he? Okay, I'm coming. I'm 2 hours away, but I'm coming right now." She was out of bed before Ethan could sit up, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. "What happened?" he asked. "My dad. He had a seizure. They got him stabilized, but..." Clara's voice broke. "The nurse said I should come. That it might be... that I should come now." Ethan was up immediately, grabbing his own clothes. "I'll drive. You're in no condition." "I can drive." "Clara, I need to do something." She whirled on him, eyes wild with panic. "I need to move. I need to get there. I can't just... I have to go, Eli." "I know, and I'm taking you. Get dressed. I'll pack our stuff." They were on the road in 15 minutes, the Honda eating up dark highway, while Clara sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring at nothing. Ethan kept one hand on the wheel and the other on her knee, trying to ground her. "He's going to be okay," she said. Not to Ethan, just to the universe. "He has to be okay. I'm not ready. I told him I wasn't ready. I know. I should have stayed. I shouldn't have left him. What kind of daughter goes off for a weekend when her father is dying? The kind who's human and needs a break, Ethan said firmly. Clara, you've been by his side for months. Taking 2 days doesn't make you a bad person. But she wasn't listening. She was somewhere else entirely, trapped in guilt and fear. They made it to the hospice facility in an hour and 45 minutes. Ethan might have broken several traffic laws. He didn't care. Clara was out of the car before he'd fully parked, running for the entrance. Ethan followed, watching her disappear through the automatic doors. He started to follow, then stopped. This wasn't his moment. This was hers and her father's. He'd wait. He sat in the parking lot for 2 hours, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to weak morning blue. His phone buzzed with messages, Margaret asking about his medication schedule, his lawyer with questions about the trust documents, his assistant wondering when he'd be back in the office. The office. Right. He'd been so consumed with Clara and Lily that he'd barely thought about his business empire. Restaurants across the country running without him. Employees depending on his leadership. Board members probably panicking about his sudden absence. He should care more, should feel something about the company he'd built from nothing. But all he could think about was the woman inside that building, saying goodbye to her father. When Clara finally emerged, it was past 8 in the morning. Ethan was leaning against the Honda, and when he saw her face, wrecked, empty, he knew. She walked straight into his arms and stood there, not crying, just breathing. He's gone, she said flatly. He woke up when I got there, was lucid enough to tell me he loved me. Then he closed his eyes and just stopped. Ethan held her tighter. I held his hand, Claire continued in that same dead voice. I told him it was okay to go, that I'd be all right, and he believed me. He died believing I'd be fine. You will be. Will I? She pulled back to look at him. Because right now I feel like someone scooped out my insides. I feel empty, Eli. Completely fucking empty. I know. And he did. He'd felt exactly this way when Sarah died. That hollow sensation like your chest was just a cavern with nothing inside. Take me home, Claire said. I can't. I need to go home. Ethan drove her to her apartment, that run-down building that made his heart hurt every time he saw it. He helped her inside into a tiny studio that smelled like coffee and old books. The space was painfully neat, dishes drying by the sink, bed made with military precision, everything in its place. Clara stood in the middle of it, looking lost. I should call people, she said. There are people I need to tell. Arrangements to make. The funeral home? Not right now, Ethan interrupted. Right now you need to breathe. I don't want to breathe. I want to... She pressed her hands to her face. I want my dad back. The tears finally came then, violent and overwhelming. Ethan caught her as her legs gave out, lowered them both to the floor, and held her while she sobbed. Great heaving cries that sounded like they were tearing her apart from the inside. He didn't try to stop her, didn't offer platitudes, just held her and let her break. When the storm finally passed, Clara sat up, wiping at her face with her sleeves. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. I'm a mess. You're grieving. There's a difference. Clara looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Stay with me? I don't want to be alone. I'm not going anywhere. That was a lie, and they both knew it. But for now, in this moment, it felt true enough. Ethan stayed with Clara for 3 days. He told Margaret he had business in another city, told his assistant to reschedule everything, told Lily he'd be back soon with a present. The lies were getting easier, which scared him. But watching Clara navigate the aftermath of her father's death, the phone calls, the funeral arrangements, the sudden hollow silence of being alone, he couldn't bring himself to leave. She moved through those days like a ghost, made coffee she didn't drink, stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what you wore to plan your father's funeral. Answered calls from relatives she barely knew who suddenly cared now that there was a body to bury. Ethan helped where he could, made the coffee actually drinkable, fielded the calls from the pushy aunt who wanted to take over the arrangements, sat beside Clara at the funeral home while she picked out a casket she couldn't afford. The basic model is fine, Clara told the funeral director, a man with too much hair gel and practiced sympathy. Whatever's cheapest. The director's smile didn't waver. Of course. Though I should mention we have payment plans if you'd like to consider something more. The basic model, Claire repeated, voice flat. After they left, she sat in the Honda and stared at her hands. $12,000. That's what it costs to die, apparently. $12,000 for a box and a hole in the ground. Ethan wanted to tell her not to worry about it, wanted to write a check right now and make the problem disappear. But Eli didn't have that kind of money lying around. Eli was a tech worker with a sick daughter and medical bills of his own. You'll figure it out, he said instead, and hated himself for the uselessness of it. That night, Clara's laptop was open on her tiny kitchen table, spreadsheets covering the screen. She'd been working on them for hours, numbers that didn't add up no matter how many times she rearranged them. I can't do it, she said quietly. Even with the insurance payout, if there even is one, and his savings, which is basically nothing, I'm short about $6,000, and that's before I pay his other debts. What about the life insurance? He let it lapse 2 years ago when money got tight, didn't tell me. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. So that's fun. My father's final gift is debt I can't pay. Ethan's mind was already working. He could set up an anonymous donation, route it through one of his shell companies, make it look like a charity or community fund. Clara would never have to know it came from him. There are resources, he started, organizations that help with funeral costs. I don't want charity. Clara closed the laptop with more force than necessary. I've spent my whole life taking care of things. I can handle this. You don't have to handle everything alone. Yes, I do. That's how it works. My mom left. My dad died. You're going to die. Eventually, everyone leaves and you're alone and you figure it out because that's what adults do. She stood up, pacing the small space. I'm sorry, I don't mean to take this out on you. Take it out on me. I can handle it. Clara stopped pacing, looking at him with eyes that had aged years in just days. Why are you still here, Eli? You have your own life, your own daughter. You should be with her, not babysitting a mess like me. You're not a mess. I'm a disaster. My dad just died. I'm drowning in debt. I work 2 minimum wage jobs and I'm falling apart in front of a guy I've known for 2 weeks. She pressed her hands to her face. This isn't how this was supposed to go. Ethan stood, moving to her. How was it supposed to go? I don't know. Less pathetic, maybe. You're not pathetic, Clara. You're dealing with impossible circumstances and doing the best you can. That's not weakness. That's strength. She looked up at him, and something in her expression shifted. You always know what to say. Not always. Usually I'm just making it up as I go. Clara leaned into him, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. They stood like that for a long time, 2 people holding each other up in the wreckage of their lives. I need to tell you something, Clara said into his shoulder. Okay. The restaurant called. They need me back tomorrow. We're short-staffed, and I already used my bereavement days taking care of my dad before he... She stopped. I have to go back to work the day after I bury my father. The anger that flooded through Ethan was immediate and visceral. He knew the new manager at Vale's Crown, had personally hired her, and she was supposed to be better than this. Supposed to have compassion. That's not right, he said carefully. It's reality. I need the money. The funeral's on Thursday. I'll work Friday. Clara pulled back. Can you come to the funeral? Of course. It'll be small, just me and a few people from the hospice, maybe some of my dad's old work friends. She tried to smile. Not exactly a party. I'll be there. And he was. Thursday morning, standing in a cemetery while rain turned the ground to mud, watching Clara say goodbye to the man who'd raised her. The service was brief and impersonal. A minister who'd never met her father reading generic platitudes. 6 people total, including Ethan and the funeral home staff. Clara stood at the graveside in a black dress that was too big on her, probably borrowed, and didn't cry. Just stared at the casket like she was trying to memorize it. When it was over and everyone else had left, she stayed and Ethan stayed with her. I keep thinking I forgot something, Clara said to the freshly turned earth. Like there's something I was supposed to say or do and I missed it, but I don't know what. You didn't miss anything. How do you know? Because you were there. That's all that mattered. Clara turned to him, rain streaming down her face. When you die, Will your daughter remember this? Standing in the rain at your funeral? The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. Probably. I'm sorry. That was cruel. It was honest. He took her hand. Come on. Let's get you out of the rain. They went back to Clara's apartment, both soaked through. She changed into dry clothes while Ethan made tea. Neither of them would drink. When she emerged from the bathroom, Clara looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. I need to ask you something, she said, sitting on the edge of her bed. And I need you to be honest. Ethan's stomach tightened. Okay. How much time do you have left, really? He'd been avoiding thinking about it. Avoiding the symptoms that were getting worse. The fatigue that now hit him like a truck. The weight loss that made his clothes hang loose. The moments where his vision would blur and the world would tilt sideways. I don't know, he said. A week. Maybe 2. Clara's face crumpled. That's not enough time. No, it's not. I just got you. I can't lose you too. Ethan sat beside her, taking her hands. Clara, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to listen. When I'm gone, don't. When I'm gone, he continued firmly, I need you to promise me you'll keep living. Really living, not just surviving, not just working yourself to death to pay off debts. Actually living. How am I supposed to do that? I don't know, but you'll figure it out. He squeezed her hands. You're stronger than you think you are. Clara kissed him then, desperate and clinging, and Ethan kissed her back, knowing it was selfish, knowing he should be spending this time with Lily, knowing he was making everything worse. But he couldn't stop. Couldn't walk away from this woman who'd somehow become essential in the space of 2 weeks. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were both made of glass. And afterward, lying tangled together in her small bed, Ethan felt the weight of his deception pressing down harder than ever. He had to tell her, had to come clean before it was too late. Clara! His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then started ringing. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. Ethan's blood went cold. Margaret never called unless it was an emergency. I have to take this, he said, extracting himself from Clara's arms. Is everything okay? I don't know. He stepped into the bathroom, closing the door. Margaret, what's wrong? It's Lily. The nanny's voice was tight with worry. She's asking for you. She's upset, Ethan. Really upset. She knows something's wrong. What do you mean she knows? She found one of the videos, the ones you're making for her future birthdays. It was on your laptop and she… Margaret's voice cracked. She saw you talking about dying. She knows. The world tilted. Ethan pressed his hand against the wall to steady himself. Put her on. Daddy? Lily's voice was small and scared, and it broke something in Ethan's chest. Where are you? I'm in the city, baby. I'll be home soon. Are you really dying? Ethan closed his eyes. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. He'd planned it, had a whole speech prepared, was going to sit her down and explain it gently, carefully, in a way a 7-year-old could understand. Yes, he said, because he couldn't lie to her. I am. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then, when? Soon. How soon? I don't know exactly, sweetheart, but probably in the next couple of weeks. That's not fair. Her voice was thick with tears. You're supposed to stay. You're my daddy. You're supposed to be here. I know, baby. I know. And I'm so sorry. Ethan's own voice was breaking. I wish I could stay. I wish I could be there for everything. For your first day of middle school and your driver's license and your wedding. But I can't. And I hate it. I hate it so much. Then don't die. Lily was crying now. Just don't die, Daddy. Please don't die. I don't have a choice, Lily. Yes, you do. The doctor said you could do treatment. You could try to fight it. The treatment won't cure me. It'll just make me really sick for the time I have left. And I'd rather spend that time being your dad than being sick in a hospital. I don't care if you're sick. I just want you to stay. Ethan slid down the wall, sitting on Clara's bathroom floor, phone pressed to his ear, tears streaming down his face. I can't, sweetheart. I'm so sorry, but I can't. Lily sobbed on the other end of the line, and Ethan had never felt more helpless in his entire life. He was a billionaire. He'd built an empire from nothing. He could make almost anything happen with enough money and determination. But he couldn't fix this. Couldn't buy more time, couldn't save himself or spare his daughter this pain. I'm coming home, he said. Right now. I'm coming home, and we're going to spend the day together, okay? We'll do whatever you want. I want you to not die. Anything except that, baby. Anything except that. He hung up and sat there for a long moment, trying to pull himself together. When he emerged from the bathroom, Clara was sitting up in bed, watching him with concerned eyes. What happened? She asked. I have to go. My daughter, she found out. About me being sick. She's falling apart and I need to be there. Clara was already moving, grabbing his shirt from the floor. Go! Of course, go! Ethan dressed quickly, movements jerky and uncoordinated. His hands were shaking. His chest felt too tight. I'm sorry, he said. I don't want to leave like this. Eli, stop. Clara took his face in her hands. Your daughter needs you. That's more important than anything. Go be with her. He kissed her quickly. I'll call you later. Take care of her. And yourself. Ethan was halfway to the door when he turned back. Clara, there's something I need to tell you. Later, she interrupted gently. Whatever it is, it can wait. Go. So he went, hating himself for the relief he felt at the delay, hating himself for the lies, hating himself for everything. The drive home felt endless. When Ethan finally walked through his front door, Lily launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his waist and crying into his stomach. I'm here, he said, holding her tight. I'm here, princess. I've got you. Margaret hovered in the doorway, looking stricken. I'm sorry. I should have been more careful with the laptop. It's not your fault. Ethan met her eyes over Lily's head. Can you give us some time? Of course. When they were alone, Ethan led Lily to the couch and pulled her into his lap, like he used to when she was smaller. She buried her face in his shoulder, still crying. Talk to me, he said quietly. Tell me what you're feeling. I'm scared, Lily whispered. I'm really, really scared, Daddy. I know. What's going to happen to me when you're gone? You'll be taken care of. Margaret's going to stay on as your nanny. Aunt Rachel is going to be your legal guardian. I don't want Aunt Rachel. I want you. I know, baby. I want me too. Lily pulled back to look at him with red, swollen eyes. Is it going to hurt when you die? Ethan had to swallow hard before he could answer. I don't think so. The doctors say I'll probably just get tired and then I'll go to sleep. And then what? I don't know. Nobody really knows what happens after. I think you become a star, Lily said seriously. So you can watch over me from the sky. Ethan's throat was so tight he could barely breathe. That sounds nice. Will you still love me when you're a star? I'll love you forever, Lily, even when I can't be here, even when you can't see me. I'll always, always love you. They sat like that for hours, Lily curled in his lap, Ethan holding her and trying to memorize the weight of her, the smell of her strawberry shampoo, the sound of her breathing. Eventually, she cried herself to sleep, and he carried her to bed, tucking her in with the stuffed rabbit. Margaret found him sitting on the floor outside Lily's bedroom, head in his hands. You look terrible, she said quietly, sitting beside him. I feel worse. How much time do you have left? Honestly, I'm not sure. Days, maybe. A week, if I'm lucky. Margaret was silent for a moment, then, There's a woman, isn't there? Ethan's head snapped up. What? The last few weeks. You've been disappearing, coming back looking like you've been somewhere that matters. Margaret gave him a knowing look. I've worked for you for 3 years. I know when you're keeping secrets. It's complicated. It always is. Her name is Clara. She worked at one of my restaurants. She doesn't know who I really am. I met her as Eli, just a regular guy, and I let her believe it because I wanted... Ethan stopped. I wanted someone to see me as just a man, not a billionaire, not the boss, just me. Does she know you're dying? Yes. But not the rest? No. Margaret sighed. Ethan, I know. I know it's wrong. I know I should have told her from the beginning, but I was selfish and stupid, and now I don't know how to fix it. You tell her the truth. She'll hate me. Maybe. Probably. Margaret put her hand on his shoulder. But she deserves to know, and you deserve to die with a clear conscience. Ethan knew she was right. Had known it for days, maybe weeks. But knowing and doing were two different things. "I'll tell her," he said. "Soon. Soon better be really soon because you're running out of time." The next morning, Ethan woke up to Lily standing beside his bed, holding her backpack. "I'm not going to school," she announced. "Lily, I'm not. I want to stay with you. Every day. Until you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan sat up slowly. His body ached in new and interesting ways. His vision was blurry at the edges. "Okay. Really? Really, we'll spend every day together from now on." Lily climbed into bed beside him, and they stayed there for a while, not talking, just being together. Eventually, they got up and made pancakes, misshapen, burnt on one side, perfect in their imperfection. Over breakfast, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Hope you and Lily are okay. Thinking of you. Call when you can." He should call. Should explain where he'd been, what was happening. But looking at his daughter across the table, sticky with syrup and trying to smile, he couldn't bring himself to divide his attention. Later, he told himself, he'd call Clara later. But later turned into evening, and evening turned into the next day, and Ethan kept putting it off. Kept telling himself he needed to focus on Lily, needed to make these last days count. The truth was, he was a coward, scared of the conversation he needed to have, scared of losing Clara before he had to. On the third day, his assistant called with news about Vale's crown. "There's a situation," Amanda said. "The investors want a meeting. They're concerned about your absence." "Tell them I'm dealing with personal matters." "I did. They want to know when you'll be back." Ethan closed his eyes. "Schedule something for next week." "Mr. Vale?" "Ethan, are you sure? You sound—" "Just schedule it, Amanda." Tuesday afternoon, the private dining room at Vale's Crown. After he hung up, Ethan realized what he'd just done. He'd scheduled a meeting at the restaurant where Clara worked. As Ethan Vale, billionaire owner in a suit and his real identity. If she was working that day, she'd see him. She'd figure it out. Maybe that was better. Maybe getting caught was easier than confessing. The meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon on Tuesday. Ethan spent Monday night with Lily, making cookies and watching movies and pretending everything was normal. She fell asleep halfway through the second film, and he carried her to bed, knowing he was getting weaker, knowing each time might be the last time he could lift her. Tuesday morning, he dressed in a suit for the first time in weeks. The jacket hung loose. He'd lost at least 15 pounds. His face in the mirror was gaunt, shadows under his eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. "You look fancy," Lily said, appearing in the doorway. "I have a work thing, just for a few hours. Can I come?" "Not this time, Princess, but I'll be back before dinner." Margaret gave him a long look when he came downstairs. "Are you telling her today?" "I don't know, maybe, if I don't collapse first." "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." The drive to Vale's Crown felt like going to an execution. Ethan parked in his reserved spot behind the building and sat there for a long moment, gathering his courage. Then he walked through the back entrance like he owned the place. Because he did. The staff straightened when they saw him. The new manager, Lisa, hurried over looking stressed. "Mr. Vale, the investors are already here. They're in the private dining room. Can I get you anything?" "Coffee. Black." "Thanks, Lisa." He made his way through the kitchen, past servers he recognized from his undercover visits, past the bar where he'd sat pretending to be nobody. The private dining room was upstairs, separated from the main floor, but the walls were glass. Anyone looking up would be able to see him. The meeting dragged on for 2 hours. Numbers and projections and concerns about his leadership. Ethan went through the motions, giving them what they needed to hear, but his attention kept drifting to the windows, to the dining room below where servers moved between tables. He didn't see Clara. Maybe she wasn't working today. Maybe he'd gotten lucky. Then the meeting ended and the investors filed out, and Ethan stood at the glass wall looking down at his restaurant, and there she was, Clara, carrying a tray of drinks, her hair in its usual ponytail, wearing the black shirt and pants that made up the server uniform. She was smiling at a customer, that genuine smile that had first caught his attention, and as if she could feel his eyes on her, she looked up, their gazes locked across the distance. Ethan watched the confusion cross her face, watched her eyes travel from his face to his suit, to the expensive watch on his wrist. Watched her look around at the private dining room, at the investors leaving, at Lisa hovering nearby. Watched the moment she connected the dots. Her face went white. The tray in her hands tilted, drinks sliding. Another server caught it before it fell, but Clara didn't notice. She was staring at Ethan with an expression of dawning horror. He saw her mouth move, forming a single word, no. Then she turned and walked away, fast, heading for the employee area. Ethan was moving before he could think, taking the stairs two at a time, pushing through the kitchen. Clara, wait! But she was already out the back door into the alley. Ethan followed, catching up to her as she leaned against the brick wall, breathing hard. Don't, she said, not looking at him. Don't say anything. I can explain. Explain what? Clara's voice was shaking. Explain how you're not Eli the tech worker, but Ethan Vale, the billionaire who owns this entire company. Explain how you've been lying to me for weeks. You didn't mean to lie? She finally looked at him, and her eyes were full of tears and fury. You walked into your own restaurant pretending to be somebody else. You watched me struggle, watched me worry about money and hours and feeding myself, and you knew the whole time you could fix it with a phone call. I did fix it. I fired Derek. I restored your hours. Without telling me it was you. Clara's voice cracked. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I told you everything. I cried on your shoulder about my problems with this restaurant, with my manager, with my life, and you just sat there playing dress up, pretending to be normal. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Ethan? She spat his real name like it was poison. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a rich guy got bored and decided to play pretend with the poor waitress. That's not fair. Fair? Clara laughed, harsh and bitter. You want to talk about fair? Fine. Let's talk about how you paid off my father's funeral costs. Don't lie. I got a call from the funeral home yesterday. An anonymous donor covered everything. That was you, wasn't it? Ethan didn't answer. Couldn't. It was you, Clara said flatly. You went behind my back and paid for my father's funeral like I'm some charity case, like I'm too stupid or too poor to handle my own life. I was trying to help. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't ask for any of this. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I asked for honesty. I asked you to be real with me, and instead you lied about who you are, about what you could do, about everything. Not everything, Ethan said desperately. My feelings for you are real. Clara, I'm in love with you. Don't you dare. Her voice went cold. Don't you dare say that to me. You don't love me. You love some idea of me. Some grateful little waitress who made you feel good about yourself in your last days. That's not true. Isn't it? Come on, Ethan. Be honest for once in your life. You wanted to be loved for who you are instead of what you have. So you found someone desperate enough, vulnerable enough, to fall for your act. Someone who'd never questioned why a random tech guy was so interested in a broke waitress. The words hit like physical blows. Clara, I can't do this. She wiped at her face, trying to pull herself together. I can't be around you right now. Maybe not ever. I need you to leave. Please, just let me explain. You had weeks to explain. Weeks to tell me the truth. Clara's voice broke completely. My father died thinking I'd met someone good, someone honest, someone who actually cared about me, and instead I met a liar who played games with my life. It wasn't a game. Then what was it? Because it feels like one to me. It feels like the universe's biggest joke. I finally let myself trust someone, let myself fall in love, and it turns out it was all fake. She looked at him with eyes full of pain. You're dying, Ethan. You have days, maybe a week, and instead of spending that time being honest, being real, you wasted it on this elaborate lie. For what? To feel normal? To pretend you weren't who you are? I wanted you to see me, Ethan said quietly. Just me. Not the money, or the power, or the image. Just the man. But the money and power are part of who you are. You can't separate them out when it's convenient and pretend they don't exist. That's not how life works. Clara shook her head. You didn't want me to see you. You wanted me to see some fantasy version of you that doesn't actually exist. She was right. Ethan knew she was right, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry, Clara. I should have told you from the beginning. I should have been honest, but I was scared and selfish and I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to call. A mistake is showing up late. This? Clara gestured between them. This is betrayal. What can I do? How can I fix this? You can't. She straightened, wiping the last tears from her face. You're dying, Ethan. Go home. Spend the time you have left with your daughter. She deserves your honesty more than I do. Clara, please. I need to get back to work. I just need you to go. She turned and walked back into the restaurant, leaving Ethan standing alone in the alley. He wanted to follow her, wanted to keep trying, but he could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself together as she walked away. He'd lost her. Ethan drove home in a daze, Clara's words echoing in his head. When he walked through the front door, Lily took one look at his face and burst into tears. What happened? She asked, running to him. Are you sicker? No, baby, He stopped. No more lies. I'm heartbroken. Why? Because I hurt someone I love, and now she won't forgive me. Lily hugged him tight. Did you say sorry? I did. Then she has to forgive you. That's the rule. It doesn't always work that way, Princess. It should. Ethan held his daughter and thought about Clara's face when she realized who he really was. Thought about the trust he'd broken, the lies he'd told, the mess he'd made of everything. Margaret found him an hour later, sitting on the floor of his bedroom, still in his suit, staring at nothing. What happened? She asked. She knows. She figured it out, and she hates me. Did you try to explain? She wouldn't listen, and honestly, I don't blame her. Ethan looked up. I ruined it, Margaret. I had one good thing, one real connection, and I destroyed it with my own stupidity. So fix it. I can't. She won't talk to me. Then make her listen. Margaret crouched down in front of him. You're dying, Ethan. You don't have time for pride or fear. If you love her, fight for her. She told me to spend my time with Lily. So spend your days with Lily and your nights fighting for Clara. You're running out of time. Stop wasting it. That night, Ethan tried calling Clara. It went straight to voicemail. He tried texting. No response. He sent flowers to her apartment with a note that said simply, I'm sorry. Please, let me explain. E. The flowers came back the next day, unopened. He was running out of time in more ways than one. His body was failing faster now. He could feel it, the weakness creeping into his bones, the fog settling over his thoughts. He'd started having episodes where he'd black out for a few seconds, wake up on the floor with Margaret hovering over him, looking terrified. You need to go to the hospital, she said after the third time. No, I'm staying here with Lily. Ethan, I'm dying, Margaret. Whether it happens in a hospital or at home doesn't change the outcome. At least here, Lily can have me for as long as possible. So he stayed home and spent every moment with his daughter. They made art projects, read books, watched movies, had long conversations about everything and nothing. And every night, after Lily fell asleep, Ethan sat in the dark and thought about Clara, about the way she smiled, the kindness in her eyes, the strength it took to keep going when everything was falling apart, about how he'd thrown it all away because he was too scared to be honest. On the 5th day after the confrontation, Ethan woke up and knew he didn't have much time left. His body felt wrong, too heavy, too slow, like it was shutting down piece by piece. His vision was graying at the edges. His heart was beating irregularly. He made it downstairs, barely, and found Margaret in the kitchen. Call Clara, he said. Please. Tell her I need to see her. Tell her it's urgent. Ethan, I'm dying, Margaret. Today, tomorrow, soon. And I need to see her one more time. I need to try to make this right before I can't anymore. Margaret looked at him, really looked, and her face went pale. Oh, God, you really are? Yeah, so please, call her. Margaret made the call while Ethan sat at the kitchen table trying to stay conscious. He heard her voice, muffled and urgent, heard her say, He's dying, for real dying. If you want to say goodbye, you need to come now. Then Margaret was hanging up, looking at him with tears in her eyes. She's coming. She said she'll be here in 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Ethan spent them trying to figure out what to say, how to apologize, how to make Clara understand that the lies came from fear, not malice. that his love for her was the only true thing in the whole mess. When the doorbell rang, Margaret answered it. Ethan heard Clara's voice, quiet and hesitant. "Where is he?" "Kitchen." "But Clara, he's bad. Really bad. Be prepared." Footsteps. Then Clara was standing in the doorway, and Ethan looked up at the woman he loved. She looked tired, sad, beautiful. "Hi," he said. "Hi." Clara stayed in the doorway, not coming closer. "Margaret said you needed to see me." "I needed to apologize, really apologize. Not just say sorry, but explain." Ethan stopped as another wave of dizziness hit. "Can you sit? Please?" Clara hesitated, then moved to the chair across from him. Up close he could see she'd been crying, could see the dark circles under her eyes that matched his own. "I lied to you," Ethan said, "about who I was, about what I could do, and there's no excuse for that. But I want you to understand why." "Okay?" Clara's voice was careful, guarded. "When my wife died, something broke inside me. I stopped being Ethan, the person, and became Ethan Vale, the brand, the billionaire, the CEO. Everyone wanted something from me. Business partners wanted deals, employees wanted jobs, charities wanted donations. Even my friends, the few I had left, they looked at me different after she died, like I was fragile, like they had to be careful around the widower." He paused, gathering strength. "Then I got the diagnosis, and it got worse. People treated me like I was already dead, and I hated it. Hated being the dying billionaire everyone pitied. So when I walked into that restaurant and you saw me as a customer, just a regular guy. It felt like freedom." Clara's expression softened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "I know I should have told you the truth. I know I should have been honest from the start. But I was selfish. I wanted one last chance to be normal. To be loved for who I am instead of what I have." Ethan's voice cracked. "And then I fell in love with you, and the lie got bigger, and I didn't know how to fix it without losing you." "So you just kept lying," Clara said quietly. "Yeah, I did. And that was wrong." Ethan met her eyes. "But Clara, please believe me. Everything else was real. The way I felt about you, the time we spent together, the person I was when I was with you. That was me. The real me." Clara was crying now, tears sliding down her face. "How am I supposed to trust that? How do I know what was real and what was part of the act?" "Because I'm telling you now. No more lies. No more hiding." Ethan reached across the table, and after a moment, Clara took his hand. "I love you. I'm in love with you. And I'm dying. And I wasted the time we had left on being scared instead of being honest. That's my biggest regret. Not the lying? The lying is part of it, but mostly I regret not trusting you with the truth, not trusting that you'd see past the money to the man underneath." Clara squeezed his hand. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Ethan. Not right now. Maybe not ever. You broke my trust in a really fundamental way. I know. But I also know you're dying, and I know you're scared, and I know what it's like to feel invisible." She wiped at her eyes. "So I'm here, I came, but I can't promise you anything else. I don't need promises. I just needed you to know I'm sorry, and that you mattered. You matter so much, Clara." They sat there, hands linked across the table, two broken people trying to find their way back to each other. Then Ethan's vision blurred and the world tilted, and he felt himself falling. The last thing he heard before everything went dark was Clara screaming his name. Ethan woke up in a hospital bed with tubes in his arms and Lily's face hovering above him. "Daddy?" Her voice was small and terrified. "You're awake." He tried to speak, but his throat was sandpaper. A nurse materialized beside the bed, checking monitors, adjusting something on one of the machines. "Welcome back, Mr. Vale. You gave everyone quite a scare." "How long?" Ethan managed to croak out. 6 hours. You collapsed at home. Severe dehydration, arrhythmia, multiple organ stress." The nurse's voice was professionally kind. "You're lucky your friend called the ambulance so quickly." Friend. Clara. Ethan turned his head, searching the room. She was there, standing in the corner like she wasn't sure she had permission to be present. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her clothes rumpled like she'd been here the whole time. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Clara moved closer but didn't sit. You scared the hell out of me. Sorry, seems to be my thing lately. Lily was gripping his hand so tight it hurt. The doctor said you're really sick now. Like, really, really sick. Ethan looked at the nurse, who gave him a meaningful look before quietly leaving the room. Margaret appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. I'll take Lily to get some food, Margaret said gently. Give you two a minute. I don't want to leave, Lily protested. I'll be right here when you get back, Princess. I promise. After they left, silence filled the space between Ethan and Clara. She still hadn't sat down. Still looked like she might bolt any second. You didn't have to stay, Ethan said. I know. Clara finally sank into the chair beside his bed. But you collapsed right in front of me. I couldn't just leave. Thank you for calling the ambulance. What else was I supposed to do? Let you die on your kitchen floor? Her voice cracked. I'm angry at you, Ethan. I'm furious. But I don't want you dead. Ethan closed his eyes. The fluorescent lights were too bright, making his head pound. What did the doctor say when I was out? That your organs are shutting down, that they can make you comfortable, but there's nothing else they can do. Clara's hands twisted in her lap. He said days, maybe a week if you're lucky. Doesn't feel very lucky. No, it doesn't. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Clara said, I've been sitting here for 6 hours trying to figure out if I should forgive you, and I still don't know. You don't have to bet. Let me finish. She looked at him directly. What you did was wrong. The lying, the manipulation, the playing pretend with my life, all of it was wrong. And part of me wants to walk out of this room and never see you again. Ethan's chest tightened. But then I think about my dad, about how at the end, all the old fights and resentment seemed so stupid, so small compared to the fact that he was dying. Clara wiped at her eyes. And I wonder if I'm going to regret this. If I'm going to regret walking away from you now because my pride was hurt. Your pride should be hurt. I treated you terribly. Yeah, you did. Clara leaned forward, elbows on her knees. But you also saw me. Really saw me. When everyone else looked through me like I was furniture, you noticed. You cared. And I don't think that was fake. It wasn't. So here's what I've decided. She took a shaky breath. I can't forgive you yet. I'm not ready for that. But I can be here. I can sit with you while you're dying. I can try to find my way back to something that doesn't feel like hate. Clara, I'm not doing this for you, she interrupted. I'm doing it for me. Because I don't want to carry regret around for the rest of my life. I don't want to be the person who walked away from someone they loved because they were too angry to see past it. Ethan felt tears burning behind his eyes. I don't deserve that. Probably not, but I'm doing it anyway. The door opened and Lily came back in, carrying a cup of terrible hospital coffee. She climbed carefully onto the bed beside Ethan, curling into his side like she used to when she was smaller. The cafeteria is gross, she announced. Margaret made me eat a sandwich anyway. Good. Someone has to keep you fed. Lily looked at Clara. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? Ethan's heart stopped. Clara's face went pink. We're friends, Clara said carefully. Daddy said he was in love with someone. Is it you? Lily, Ethan started, but Clara held up a hand. Yeah, she said, meeting Lily's eyes. It's me. Are you going to stay? Everyone else leaves. The question landed like a punch. Clara looked at Ethan, then back at Lily, and he could see her struggling with how to answer. What do you tell a 7-year-old whose mother died and whose father is dying and who's terrified of being abandoned again? I'm going to stay as long as I can, Clara said finally. But your dad and I were working some things out. Adult stuff. It's complicated. Everything's always complicated, Lily said, sounding far too old for her age. I hate complicated. Me too, kid. Me too. A doctor came in then, young and earnest with a tablet full of information Ethan didn't want to hear. His liver was failing. His heart was struggling. His kidneys were on their way out. They could keep him comfortable with medication, but moving him home would require hospice care. How long? Ethan asked. The doctor hesitated. It's hard to say exactly. Best guess. How long? 3 days. Maybe 4. I'm sorry, Mr. Vale. Lily made a small sound against his chest. Ethan held her tighter, feeling his own heart crack wide open. I want to go home, he said. Can you arrange hospice care? Of course. We'll have someone contact you about setting it up. After the doctor left, Margaret came in looking grim. I already called the hospice agency your lawyer recommended. They can have someone at the house by tomorrow morning. Thank you. Ethan, Margaret's voice broke. I'm so sorry. Don't. Not yet. I'm not dead yet. But he would be, soon. The reality of it was sinking in now, not as an abstract concept, but as a concrete fact. 3 days, 72 hours to say everything he needed to say, do everything he needed to do, be everything his daughter needed before he couldn't be anything at all. Clara stood abruptly. I should go. Let you rest. Wait. Ethan reached for her hand. Can you come by the house tomorrow? After they get me settled? She looked conflicted. Ethan, please, I know I don't have the right to ask, but please. Clara glanced at Lily, still curled against Ethan's side, watching them with big, scared eyes. Okay, tomorrow, but I'm not making any promises beyond that. That's enough. She left, and Ethan spent the rest of the evening with Lily and Margaret, pretending everything was fine, even though they all knew it wasn't. The nurses came and went, adjusting medications, checking vitals, speaking in hushed tones like he was already gone. That night, alone in the dark hospital room, Ethan thought about all the things he'd never get to do. Never walk Lily down the aisle, never meet his grandchildren, never grow old with someone he loved, never get the chance to make things right with Clara. He'd wasted so much time. On work, on appearances, on maintaining the image of the successful billionaire. And now, at the end, none of it mattered. The restaurants, the money, the empire he'd built, it would all continue without him. The only thing that mattered was the people he'd loved and the time he'd had with them. And he'd squandered it. Lied when he should have been honest. Hid when he should have been vulnerable. Played games when he should have been real. The next morning, they transported him home in an ambulance. The hospice nurse, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes and efficient hands, met them there. She set up monitors, explained the medications, showed Margaret how to manage the pain pump. The goal now is comfort, Patricia said gently. We want to make sure he's not in pain, that he's peaceful. Do you understand? Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her face. They'd set up a hospital bed in Ethan's bedroom. He hated it, hated the clinical feel of it, the way it turned his space into a sick room. But he didn't have the energy to fight. Just getting from the ambulance to the bed had wiped him out completely. Lily refused to leave his side. She climbed into the bed beside him, careful of the tubes and wires, and held his hand like she could anchor him to life through sheer force of will. Tell me a story, she said, like you used to when I was little. So Ethan told her stories, made-up tales about brave princesses and magic forests and adventures that always ended happily. His voice got weaker as the day wore on, but he kept going, kept spinning narratives because it made Lily smile. Clara showed up around noon carrying a bag from a bookstore. I brought something for Lily, she explained, pulling out a stack of art supplies. Thought she might want something to do. Lily's eyes lit up. Can we draw together? Sure, kid. What do you want to draw? Daddy, as a superhero. Claire's eyes met Ethan's over Lily's head. That sounds perfect. They spent the afternoon drawing while Ethan drifted in and out, the pain medication making everything soft and hazy. He'd wake up to the sound of Lily's laughter, to Clara's quiet voice explaining how to shade or add details. They were building something together, these two people he loved, and it made his chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with dying. When Lily finally crashed, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the last few days, Clara helped Margaret carry her to her own room. When they came back, Margaret excused herself, leaving Clara and Ethan alone. Clara sat in the chair beside the bed, hands folded in her lap. She's amazing, Clara said quietly. Your daughter. She's smart and funny and so brave. She gets it from her mother. I think she gets some of it from you too. Clara looked at him. How are you feeling? Like death, which is appropriate, I guess. That's not funny. Little bit funny. Ethan shifted, trying to get comfortable. The movement sent pain shooting through his side. Clara, I need to tell you something. Okay. There's a letter in my office, in the top drawer of my desk. It's addressed to you. Clara's expression shifted to something wary. What kind of letter? The kind you read after I'm gone. It explains some things. About provisions I've made. He saw her start to protest and held up a hand. Let me finish. Please. She pressed her lips together but nodded. I set up an account for you. Not a huge amount. Enough to cover your father's debts and give you some breathing room. Enough to pursue that art thing you talked about. Ethan forced himself to meet her eyes. And before you get angry, I didn't do it to control you or because I think you need saving. I did it because I love you. Because you deserve a chance to live instead of just survive. Ethan, the money comes with no strings, no expectations. You can use it or not use it. You can hate me forever and still take it. I don't care. I just need to know that when I'm gone, you'll have options. Clara was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. You can't just fix everything with money. I know, but it's the only thing I have to give you that might actually help. I don't want your money. I want... She stopped, swallowing hard. I wanted you. The real you. For longer than 3 days. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Clara stood abruptly, pacing to the window. This isn't fair. None of this is fair. I finally meet someone who makes me feel seen and he's dying. My dad just died and now you're dying and I'm so tired of losing people I love. Ethan wanted to go to her, wanted to hold her, but he couldn't move without excruciating pain. Come here, please. She turned, looking at him with devastated eyes. Come here, he repeated. Clara walked back to the bed slowly, like she was afraid of what would happen when she got close. But when she sat on the edge of the mattress, Ethan took her hand and pulled her down beside him. I'm going to tell you something true, he said. Something completely honest with no bullshit. Okay? Meeting you was the best thing that happened to me in the last 3 years. Maybe longer. You made me remember what it felt like to be human, not a CEO or a billionaire or a brand, just a person who could fall in love and laugh and feel things. Ethan, I know I screwed it up. I know I lied and hid and ruined everything. But I need you to know that the time we spent together, it mattered. You matter. And I'm sorry I didn't have more time to show you that. Clara was fully crying now, her shoulders shaking. I loved you. I still love you. And I hate that. I hate that I can't just be angry because you're dying and it's not fair. You can be both, angry and sad. They're not mutually exclusive. I know, but it sucks. Yeah, it really does. They lay there together, Clara's head on Ethan's shoulder, both of them crying quietly. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of orange and gold. Inside, time was running out. Patricia, the hospice nurse, came by around 8 to check on him. Her face when she saw the monitors told Ethan everything he needed to know. How long, Gage? He asked when Clara had stepped out to use the bathroom. Patricia hesitated. It's progressing faster than we expected. Your organs are failing rapidly. I'd say hours, not days. Hours. I'm sorry. Is there anyone you need to call? Anything you need to do? Ethan thought about his lawyer, his business partners, the dozens of people who'd want to say goodbye. Then he thought about Lily sleeping in the next room and Clara in his bathroom trying to compose herself. No, he said. Everyone who matters is already here. When Clara came back, her face was blotchy but calmer. She'd clearly been splashing water on it, trying to pull herself together. Patricia says you don't have much time, she said quietly. I know. Should we wake Lily? Not yet. Let her sleep a little longer. Ethan's vision was getting hazy around the edges. His breathing was getting harder. Clara, I need you to promise me something. What? When I'm gone, when this is over, I need you to help Lily remember me. Not the billionaire or the CEO, just her dad. The person who made her pancakes and told her stories and loved her more than anything. Clara's voice was thick with tears. Of course I'll do that. And I need you to live. Really live. Use the money, don't use the money, I don't care. But don't let grief bury you. Don't let losing your dad and losing me turn you into someone who just exists instead of living. That's a pretty big ask. I know. But you promised my dad you'd try. Now promise me. Clara took his hand, squeezing it tight. I promise, I'll try. That's all I can ask. They talked for another hour, quietly, about everything and nothing. Clara told him about her childhood dreams, the stories she used to make up, the life she'd imagined before reality got in the way. Ethan told her about Sarah, about falling in love at 23 and thinking they'd have forever. I thought I'd have more time, he said. Thought I'd get to see Lily grow up, get married, have kids of her own. Thought I'd get old and boring and die peacefully in my sleep at 90. That would have been nice. Yeah, but I got this instead. 32 years and a body that quit on me. Ethan's breathing was getting labored now. Each breath felt like work. Not the worst life, though. I got to build something. Got to be Lily's dad. Got to meet you. Don't talk like you're summing things up. You're not done yet. Clara, I'm dying. Right now. We both know it. She made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. I hate this. I hate all of this. Me too. Margaret came in around 10, took one look at the monitors, and her face crumpled. Should I wake Lily? Ethan nodded. He didn't trust his voice. When Lily stumbled in, still half asleep, she took one look at her father and understood. Kids always knew. They could sense when the world was about to shift beneath their feet. Daddy? Her voice was so small. Come here, princess. Lily climbed onto the bed, settling into the crook of Ethan's arm. Clara moved to give them space, but Ethan grabbed her hand. Stay. Both of you stay. So they did. Margaret stood at the foot of the bed, crying silently. Clara sat on one side, holding Ethan's hand. Lily curled into his other side, her small body shaking with sobs. I don't want you to go, Lily whispered. I know, baby. I don't want to go either. But I don't have a choice. It's not fair. No, it's really not. Ethan kissed the top of her head. But you're going to be okay. You're so strong, Lily. Stronger than you know. And you have people who love you. Margaret, Aunt Rachel, Clara, they're all going to take care of you. But I want you. I know. And I'll always be with you. Maybe not the way I am now, but I'll be there. In your memories. In the stories people tell you about me, and all the little things you do that remind people of your old dad. Lily was crying too hard to speak now, just holding on to him like she could keep him alive through sheer force of will. Ethan looked at Clara. Take care of her, please. I will. I promise. And take care of yourself. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. The pain was getting worse now, even through the medication. Ethan's vision was tunneling, darkness creeping in from the edges. His breathing was shallow and rapid. Each heartbeat felt like it might be the last. I love you, Lily, he managed to say. I love you so much, princess. Don't ever forget that. I love you too, Daddy. Please don't go. Please. But Ethan was already going. Could feel himself slipping away like water through fingers. The room was getting dimmer. Sounds were muffled and distant. The last thing he saw was Lily's face, tear-stained and terrified. The last thing he felt was Clara's hand in his and his daughter's weight against his chest. The last thing he heard was someone, maybe Clara, maybe Margaret, saying, It's okay. You can let go. We'll be okay. And then Ethan Vale, 32 years old, billionaire restaurateur, widowed father, lying man who'd tried to find truth at the end, let go. The monitors flatlined with a sound that was both mechanical and final. Patricia moved quickly, checking for signs of life she already knew weren't there, then quietly turning off the machines. I'm sorry for your loss, she said softly. Lily's scream was a sound Clara would hear in her nightmares for years. A child's grief, raw and total, tearing through the quiet house like a physical force. Margaret scooped her up, holding her tight while she sobbed, carrying her out of the room because no 7-year-old should have to see their father's body going still. Clara stayed. Sat beside the bed holding Ethan's hand even though there was no one left to hold it back. His face looked peaceful now, all the pain and fear smoothed away. He looked younger, like the man he'd been before cancer, and lies and dying had aged him. You idiot, she whispered to his still form. You beautiful, stupid idiot. Patricia gave her privacy, stepping out to help Margaret with Lily. Clara sat there alone with Ethan's body and thought about everything that had happened in the last few weeks. The lies and the truth. The love and the hurt. The brief, shining moment when she'd thought maybe she'd found something real. She had found something real. It was just wrapped in so many layers of deception that the truth had gotten lost. Clara reached into Ethan's bedside table and found what she was looking for, the stuffed rabbit he kept there, the one he'd mentioned that belonged to Lily. She took it, along with one of his shirts that still smelled like him, and went to find the little girl who'd just lost everything. Lily was in her room, curled in Margaret's lap, still crying, but quieter now. The kind of crying that came from a place too deep for screaming. "I brought you something," Clara said quietly, holding out the rabbit and the shirt. Lily took them both, burying her face in the shirt. "It smells like Daddy." "I know, sweetie." "Is he really gone?" Clara swallowed hard. "Yeah, he's really gone. I want him back." "I know, I want that too." Lily looked up at her with devastated eyes. "You promised you'd stay. You promised Daddy." Clara's heart broke all over again. She sat down on the bed beside Margaret and Lily, and when the little girl reached for her, she pulled her close. "I'm not going anywhere," Clara said. "I promise. I'm going to stay right here and help you through this." "Really?" "Really. Your dad asked me to help you remember him. And I'm going to do that. We're going to remember him together." Lily clung to her, this woman she barely knew who'd somehow become essential in the space of a crisis. And Clara held her, this child who'd lost both parents before the age of 8, and made a silent vow. She would keep her promises. To Ethan, to Lily, to herself. She would live. She would help this little girl heal. She would find a way to be angry and sad and grateful and heartbroken all at once. Because that's what you did when someone you loved died lying to you, but loving you anyway. You forgave them, eventually. And you kept going, even when it felt impossible. The funeral happened on a gray Thursday that matched everyone's mood. Clara stood in the back of the church. Because, of course, there was a church service, even though Ethan had never been particularly religious, and watched hundreds of people file in, business associates in expensive suits, restaurant staff who'd never met their boss but came anyway, society types who probably didn't even like Ethan but showed up because that's what you did when a billionaire died. Lily sat in the front row between Margaret and her Aunt Rachel, a woman Clara had met exactly once. Rachel looked like she'd stepped out of a catalog. Perfectly styled blonde hair, tasteful black dress, the kind of put together that came from having money and time. She'd been polite to Clara, distant, like she couldn't quite figure out what this random waitress was doing at her nephew's deathbed. Clara couldn't figure it out either, honestly. The service was long and impersonal. People got up and talked about Ethan Vale, the successful businessman, the philanthropist, the visionary who'd revolutionized upscale dining. Nobody mentioned Ethan, the person. Ethan, who made terrible pancakes for his daughter. Ethan, who'd disguised himself to see his own restaurant. Ethan, who'd fallen in love with a waitress and lied about who he was because he was scared. When it was over, Clara slipped out before anyone could corner her with questions. She'd promised Lily she'd come to the house later, but right now she needed air. Needed space to process the fact that the man she'd loved for 2 weeks was actually gone. Her apartment felt too quiet when she got home. Too empty. Clara stood in the middle of it and realized she'd been avoiding being here. Had spent the last week either at Ethan's house helping with Lily or picking up extra shifts at the restaurant because staying busy meant not thinking. But now she was alone with her thoughts, and they were loud. She pulled out her phone and stared at the last text Ethan had sent her, the one from before everything fell apart, when he was still Eli and she still believed in the fairy tale. "Thinking about you. Hope you're having a good day." Such a simple message, so ordinary. And now it felt like an artifact from another life. Clara opened her laptop, intending to job search. She needed something better than waitressing if she was going to survive, but instead found herself staring at the email from Ethan's lawyer. It had arrived 2 days ago, the day after the funeral, with the subject line, "Regarding provisions made on your behalf." She hadn't opened it yet, hadn't been ready to deal with whatever Ethan had done. Now, sitting in her quiet apartment with nothing but grief for company, Clara clicked it open. The email was brief and professional, explaining that Ethan had established a trust in her name. The lawyer, a man named Richard Chen, requested a meeting to discuss the details and deliver a letter Ethan had written. Clara stared at the screen for a long time. Then she hit reply. "I can meet tomorrow. 2 p.m. works." The law office was in a building that made Clara feel underdressed, even though she'd worn her nicest clothes. Richard Chen was in his 50s, kind-eyed, with the sort of gentle demeanor that probably helped when dealing with grieving people. "Ms. Hayes, thank you for coming." He gestured to a chair across from his massive desk. "I know this must be difficult." "It's fine. Let's just get through it." Richard nodded, pulling out a folder. Mr. Vale was very specific about his wishes regarding you. He established a trust fund in the amount of $200,000. Clara's breath caught. "I'm sorry, what?" $200,000. The funds are available to you immediately with no restrictions on use. Mr. Vale was clear that this was a gift, not a loan or obligation. He wanted you to have options. $200,000. That was more money than Clara had ever imagined having. More than enough to pay off her father's debts, cover funeral costs, go back to school, actually live instead of just survive. "I can't accept this," she heard herself say. "I understand it's overwhelming." "No, you don't understand. He lied to me about who he was, what he could do, everything. I can't just take his money like that makes it okay." Richard's expression softened. "Ms. Hayes, may I be honest with you? Please." "I worked with Ethan for 5 years. I handled his business deals, his estate planning, all of it. And in that time, I never saw him care about anyone the way he cared about you." Richard pulled an envelope from the folder. "He wrote this letter 3 days before he died. Made me promise I'd give it to you in person. Whatever happened between you two, whatever mistakes he made, he loved you. That much I know for certain." Clara took the envelope with shaking hands. Her name was written on the front in Ethan's handwriting, slightly shaky like he'd been weak when he wrote it. Do you mind if I read this alone?" "Of course, take your time. I'll be in the conference room when you are ready to discuss the details." After he left, Clara sat in the expensive leather chair and stared at the envelope. Part of her wanted to rip it up unread, wanted to reject everything Ethan had tried to give her because accepting it felt like forgiving him, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. But another part, the part that had loved him despite everything, needed to know what he'd written. She opened it. The letter was 3 pages, front and back, covered in Ethan's increasingly unsteady handwriting. "Dear Clara, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Probably been dead for a few days, knowing how efficient Richard is. I hope the funeral wasn't too terrible. I tried to keep my instructions simple, but knowing my family, they probably turned it into a production anyway. I'm writing this at 2 a.m., 3 days after you found out who I really am. 3 days after I saw your face when you realized I'd been lying. You won't talk to me. You changed your number, which I probably deserve, so I'm writing this instead. First, I'm sorry. I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for lying about who I was. I'm sorry for manipulating your life from behind the scenes. I'm sorry for being such a coward that I couldn't just be honest from the start. I've been thinking a lot about why I did it. And yeah, part of it was wanting to be seen as just a guy instead of a billionaire. But if I'm being really honest, and I figure I should be honest now since I'm dying and lies seem pretty stupid when you're running out of time, part of it was control. My whole life I've controlled everything. Built my business from nothing through sheer force of will. Controlled my image, my reputation, every detail of how people saw me. When Sarah died, I lost control. When I got the diagnosis, I lost even more. So when I met you, I grabbed on to the one thing I could still control, the narrative. I got to decide who you thought I was, got to craft the perfect version of myself. And that was wrong. So incredibly wrong. You deserve the truth. You deserve to make informed choices about who you were spending time with, who you were falling in love with. I took that away from you because I was selfish. Here's the thing, though, and I need you to believe this. Everything else was real. The way I felt about you, the conversations we had, the person I was when we were together. That was the real me. The most real I'd been in years, actually. You made me remember what it felt like to be human. Not a CEO or a brand or a dying man everyone pitied. Just Ethan. Just a guy who liked talking to you and hearing you laugh and watching you be kind to strangers who didn't deserve it. By now, Richard has probably told you about the trust fund. I know you're probably angry about that too. Maybe you're thinking about refusing it to prove a point. Don't. That money isn't about controlling you or buying your forgiveness or whatever you might be worried about. It's about giving you the freedom I took from you when I lied. the freedom to choose what you want to do with your life instead of just surviving. Use it to pay off your dad's debts. Use it to go to art school. Use it to tell me to fuck off from beyond the grave if that makes you feel better. I don't care. Just use it. Because here's what I learned in my last few weeks. Time is the only thing that actually matters. Not money, not success, not reputation, just time and what you do with it. I wasted so much time on things that didn't matter. Board meetings and networking events and maintaining an image. Time I could have spent with Lily or Sarah or building real connections with people instead of business relationships. Don't make my mistake. Don't waste your life being careful or scared or stuck in survival mode. Live, Clara. Really live. Chase the dreams you gave up. Take risks. Be messy and imperfect and beautifully human. And speaking of Lily, I know I asked you to help her remember me. I meant it, but I also want you to know you don't owe me that. You don't owe me anything. If you need to walk away from all of this, from her, from the money, from the memories, do it. Your healing matters too. But if you can find it in yourself to stay in her life, even a little bit, I think you'd be good for each other. She needs someone who knew me as more than the billionaire dad, someone who saw the person underneath. And I think you might need her too. A reminder that good things can come from messy situations. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I hope someday you can look back on our time together and remember the good parts. The coffee dates and the cabin weekend and the quiet moments when it was just us. I hope you remember that I loved you, completely, imperfectly, but real. Take care of yourself, Clara Hayes. Be brave. Be reckless. Be everything you haven't let yourself be because you were too busy surviving. And if you think of me sometimes, remember, I died grateful. Grateful that I got to meet you. Grateful that you showed me what really matters. Grateful for every moment, even the ones I screwed up. Love, Ethan. P.S. There's a painting in my office. Small one, watercolor, of a woman reading in a coffee shop. I bought it from a street artist 2 years ago, and it always reminded me of you before I even met you. I left instructions for it to be delivered to your apartment. You don't have to keep it, but I wanted you to have it anyway. Clara read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. By the 3rd read-through, she was ugly crying in Richard Chen's office, not caring who heard. Ethan had been an idiot, a beautiful, complicated, frustrating idiot, but he'd loved her. That came through in every word. And despite everything, the lies, the manipulation, the hurt, she'd loved him too. Maybe she still did. Richard knocked softly before entering. "Miss Hayes, are you all right?" Clara wiped her face with her sleeve. "No, but I will be. Shall we discuss the trust details?" "Yeah, let's do that." They spent the next hour going over paperwork. The money was real, unrestricted, available immediately. Ethan had also left her a small monthly income from one of his restaurant holdings. Not enough to live lavishly, but enough to supplement whatever she chose to do. "He wanted to make sure you didn't have to waitress unless you wanted to," Richard explained. His words, not mine. When Clara finally left the office, she had a folder full of documents and a painting being delivered tomorrow, and a future that suddenly looked very different than it had that morning. She went to see Lily. Margaret answered the door, looking exhausted. "Clara, come in. Lily's been asking for you." The house felt different without Ethan in it, quieter, emptier, like the life had been sucked out along with its owner. Lily was in her room, surrounded by drawings. She looked up when Clara entered, and her face crumpled. "You came." "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I?" Lily launched herself at Clara, wrapping her arms around her waist. "Everyone keeps saying Daddy's in a better place now, but how can that be true? The better place is here with me." Clara's heart broke all over again. She sat down on Lily's bed and pulled the little girl into her lap. They say that because they don't know what else to say. Because death is scary and uncomfortable and people want to make it sound less terrible. Clara smoothed Lily's hair. "But you're right. The better place would be here with you. Everyone lies about it. They act like he's on vacation or sleeping or watching from heaven, but he's just gone." "Yeah, he is." Lily looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. "Do you think he's really watching? Like, can he see us?" Clara thought about all the easy answers she could give, the comfortable lies that might make a 7-year-old feel better. But Ethan had asked her to help Lily remember him honestly, and that meant being honest now. I don't know, sweetie. Nobody really knows what happens after we die. But I think if there's any way he can see you, he is, because you were the most important thing in the world to him. More important than his restaurants? Way more important. More important than anything. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, Clara, are you going to leave too? No, I'm staying. You promise? Clara hesitated. She'd learned from Ethan what happened when you made promises you couldn't guarantee. Life was unpredictable. Things changed. But looking at Lily's desperate face, she made the promise anyway. I promise. I'm not going anywhere. Lily buried her face in Clara's shoulder and cried. And Clara held her and cried too, mourning the man they'd both loved in different ways. Over the next few weeks, Clara became a fixture in Lily's life. She'd come over after her shifts at the restaurant, help with homework, listen to stories about Ethan, look at old photos. Sometimes they'd cry together. Sometimes they'd laugh at memories. Mostly, they just existed in the same space, two people learning to live with loss. Margaret watched it all with quiet approval. You're good for her, she told Clara one evening while Lily was asleep. She lights up when you're here. She's good for me too. Ethan knew that. He told me he thought you two would help each other heal. Clara looked at the older woman. Did he tell you everything about how we met? He told me he'd been an idiot who lied to a good woman and died before he could make it right. Margaret poured herself coffee. He also told me he loved you, and that you made his last weeks bearable. I don't know if I've forgiven him yet. You don't have to forgive him to move forward. Sometimes we carry complicated feelings about people for the rest of our lives. Margaret's eyes were knowing. My husband left me 30 years ago, walked out when our kids were small and never came back. I was angry for a decade. Then he died in a car accident and I felt guilty for still being angry. Took me another decade to realize I could be both. Angry at what he did and sad that he was gone. That both feelings could exist at the same time. How did you move on? I decided his choices didn't get to define my life, that I could acknowledge the hurt and still build something good. Margaret smiled slightly. You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think. 3 months after Ethan's death, Clara made a decision. She quit waitressing. Not immediately. She gave proper notice, trained her replacement, left on good terms. But she walked out of Vale's Crown for the last time and didn't look back. With the money from the trust, she paid off every cent of her father's debts, covered the funeral costs, set aside an emergency fund. And then, terrified but determined, she enrolled in art classes at a community college. The first day of class, she sat in the back with her sketchbook and thought about all the years she'd let this dream die. All the time she'd told herself art was impractical, impossible, a luxury she couldn't afford. Ethan had given her the ability to afford it, but more than that, he'd shown her what happened when you wasted time being scared. The instructor, a woman named Diane, with paint-stained fingers and infectious enthusiasm, looked at Clara's tentative sketches and said, You've got something here. Raw, but something. Clara went home that night and cried. Happy tears this time. She told Lily about it the next day. They were at the park, watching ducks on the pond. I started art school, Clara said. Lily's face lit up. Really? That's so cool. Are you going to draw stuff? That's the plan. Can you teach me? I want to get better at drawing. I'd love to teach you. They started having art sessions together. Once a week, Claire would come over and they'd draw for hours. Lily had talent, real talent, and watching it emerge was like watching a flower bloom. Your dad would be proud of you, Clara said one afternoon, looking at Lily's drawing of the ocean. You think so? I know so. He loved that you were creative, loved that you saw the world differently. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm starting to forget his voice. I try to remember what he sounded like, and I can't. Clara's heart squeezed. She pulled out her phone. Your dad made videos for you, for future birthdays. Did anyone tell you about those? Aunt Rachel mentioned them, but said I was too young. You're not too young. Clara looked at Margaret, who'd been hovering in the doorway. Right? Margaret hesitated, then nodded. I think she's ready. They watched the first video together. The one Ethan had made for Lily's 8th birthday, which had passed a month ago. He looked healthier in it, had recorded it before he got really sick. His voice was strong and clear as he wished her happy birthday, told her he loved her, made jokes about her being so grown up. Lily cried through the whole thing, but afterwards she said, "I remember now. I remember his voice." "You want to watch it again?" "Yeah. Can we watch all of them?" "Let's maybe save some for later," Margaret said gently. "Space them out so you have something to look forward to." But they watched the 8th birthday video 3 more times that day, and Clara noticed that each time Lily cried a little less and smiled a little more. 6 months after Ethan's death, Clara had her first art show. It was small, a coffee shop gallery, barely 20 people in attendance, but her work was on the walls. Watercolors and sketches, most of them depicting ordinary moments. A woman reading, a child sleeping, 2 people holding hands. Lily came with Margaret, dressed in her nicest outfit, beaming with pride. "This one's my favorite," she announced, pointing to a painting of a father and daughter making pancakes. The figures were indistinct, impressionistic, but the love was clear. "That's beautiful," a stranger said, peering at the price tag. "Is it for sale?" Clara had planned to sell everything, needed to start building a career, making connections. But looking at that painting, one she'd done from memory, from the stories Lily had told her, she couldn't do it. "It's not for sale," she heard herself say, "but I'm taking commissions." She sold 3 paintings that night, got 4 commission requests. It wasn't going to make her rich, but it was a start. When everyone had left and the coffee shop was closing, Clara sat with Lily and Margaret, drinking terrible coffee and eating leftover pastries. "Your dad would have loved this," Clara said to Lily. "He would have bragged to everyone who'd listen about how talented you both are." "Both?" "You, for your art. Me, for finally doing something with mine." Clara smiled. "He used to tell me I should chase my dreams. Guess I finally listened." Lily grinned. "Took you long enough." "A kid. You sound like your dad." "Good. I want to be like him. The real him, not the billionaire version." Clara understood that. She'd spent months learning about Ethan Vale, the public figure, reading articles, watching interviews, hearing stories from people who'd worked with him. That man was impressive, successful, driven. But she preferred Eli, the man who'd sat with her in diners drinking terrible coffee, who'd listened when she talked about her dreams, who'd seen her as a person instead of a transaction. That was the version of Ethan she wanted to remember, the version Lily deserved to know. 1 year after Ethan's death, Clara got a letter from Richard Chen. There was a second trust fund, he explained, one Ethan had set up to activate a year after his passing. This one was specifically for Lily's future, college, wedding, whatever she needed. But he'd also included a provision for Clara. "If Clara Hayes is still actively involved in Lily's life 1 year after my death, I want her to receive an additional $50,000, not as payment, but as thanks, as recognition that she kept her promise when she didn't have to." Clara stared at the letter for a long time. Then she called Rachel. "I can't accept this," she said when Lily's aunt answered. "Why not?" "Because I'm not in Lily's life for money. I'm in it because I love her, because she's become important to me. Taking money for that feels wrong." Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then, "Ethan was my brother's husband's cousin. We weren't close, but I've watched you with Lily this year, and I've seen what you've done for her. You've helped her grieve and heal and remember her father honestly. That's worth more than $50,000. But take the money, Clara. Put it toward your art career. Use it to secure your future so you can keep being there for Lily without financial stress. Ethan wanted that for you. Let him have it." So Clara took the money, used part of it to rent a small studio space where she could paint and teach classes. Used the rest to create a scholarship fund for kids who wanted to study art but couldn't afford it. She named it the Ethan Vale Memorial Scholarship. Not after the billionaire, but after the man who'd believed in chasing dreams even when time was running out. 2 years after Ethan's death, Clara sold her first painting to a real gallery. It was the one from her coffee shop show, the father and daughter making pancakes. She'd recreated it in a larger format, added more detail, poured everything she'd learned into making it perfect. The gallery owner loved it. "There's so much emotion here, so much love. What's the story behind it?" Clara thought about lying, about making up something generic. But she'd learned from Ethan what happened when you built relationships on fiction. It's about a man I loved who died, she said honestly, and the daughter he left behind, and learning that love doesn't end just because someone's gone. The painting sold within a week. The buyer wanted to commission a whole series. Clara called Lily, who was 9 now and growing up too fast. Want to help me with a project? What kind of project? I need to paint memories, good ones, and I think you've got a lot of them stored up. They spent hours going through photographs, videos, stories. Lily would talk about her dad, the real memories, not idealized versions, and Clara would translate them into paint and canvas. Ethan teaching Lily to ride a bike. Ethan burning dinner and ordering pizza instead. Ethan asleep on the couch with Lily curled on his chest. The series was called 32. One painting for each year of Ethan's life. It was Clara's breakthrough. Galleries across the country wanted to show it. Art critics called it a meditation on loss and memory. People connected with it in ways Clara had never imagined. But the best response came from Lily, standing in front of the full collection, tears streaming down her face. "He's not gone," she whispered. "As long as we remember him like this, he's not really gone." Clara hugged her tight. "No, sweetie, he's not gone." 3 years after Ethan's death, Clara moved into a bigger apartment. Not huge, she wasn't interested in luxury, but big enough to have a proper studio and a second bedroom. That room was for Lily, for the nights when she needed space from Aunt Rachel's house, when she just needed to be somewhere that felt like hers. They painted the walls together, sky blue with white clouds, Lily's choice. "This feels like home," Lily said, standing in the middle of the empty room. "Good. That's what I want it to be, a home." "Clara, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think Daddy knew that we'd end up like this? Like family?" Clara thought about it, about the letter Ethan had written, about his hope that she and Lily would be good for each other. "Yeah, I think he knew, or at least hoped. I'm glad he was right." "Me too, kid. Me too." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in her new room, Clara sat in her studio and looked at the painting Ethan had left her, the watercolor of a woman reading in a coffee shop. She'd hung it above her desk where she could see it every day. She'd been so angry when she first saw it, angry that he'd bought something that reminded him of her before they'd even met, like he'd been crafting a narrative. But now she understood it differently. Ethan hadn't been crafting a narrative. He'd been lonely, grieving, looking for connection anywhere he could find it. And he'd seen something in that painting that spoke to him, a quiet moment of peace in a chaotic world, just like he'd found that same peace with her. Clara pulled out a fresh canvas and started painting. Not from memory or photographs this time, but from imagination. She painted Ethan as she'd known him, as Eli, sitting in a diner with terrible coffee, smiling at something she'd said, looking like a regular guy instead of a billionaire. It wasn't for sale, wasn't for anyone but her. It was forgiveness, finally translated into art. 5 years after Ethan's death, Lily turned 12. She was tall now, shooting up like a weed, all knobby knees and new angles. She'd kept drawing, gotten even better, started talking about art school someday. For her birthday, Clara gave her a set of professional art supplies. Rachel gave her a new bike. Margaret gave her a journal with Ethan's handwriting on the first page, a letter he'd written for this exact birthday. They watched the video together, all of them. Ethan at his desk, looking tired but happy, talking to his future daughter. "Happy 12th birthday, princess. By now you're probably taller than I ever was. Probably smarter too. Definitely more talented. I hope you're still drawing. I hope you're chasing the things that make you happy. I hope you're not letting fear hold you back from anything. And I hope, really hope, that you're not too angry at me for leaving. I didn't want to go, would have stayed forever if I could. But since I couldn't, I tried to make sure you'd be okay without me. I love you, Lily. Always will. Even from wherever I am now. Keep being amazing. Keep being you. And remember, it's okay to be sad sometimes. It's okay to miss me. But don't let missing me stop you from living. Your old dad, Ethan, Lily cried, but not as hard as she used to. The grief was still there, but it had changed shape, become something she could carry instead of something that crushed her. I still miss him, she said when the video ended. That never goes away, Clara told her. You just get better at living with it. Do you still miss him? Clara considered lying, considered saying she'd moved on completely, that the wounds had healed, but she'd promised to always be honest with Lily. Every day, she admitted. Not the same way I did at first, but yeah, I miss him. Miss what we could have been if he'd had more time. Do you think you'll ever fall in love again? Maybe, someday. Your dad wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life alone. But you're not alone, Lily said. You have me. Clara pulled her close. Yeah, kid, I have you. 7 years after Ethan's death, Clara had her first solo show at a major gallery. The opening was packed, collectors, critics, regular people who'd connected with her work. The series on display was her most personal yet. Paintings of ordinary moments between people who loved each other. Parents and children. Partners holding hands. Friends laughing over coffee. Lily, 14 now and impossibly grown up, stood beside one of the paintings, looking proud. This one's my favorite, she told anyone who'd listen. It was the recreation of the father-daughter pancake painting, the one that had started everything. A reporter asked Clara about her inspiration. You paint a lot about loss and memory. Is there a story there? Clara looked at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. 7 years ago, I met a man who was dying. He lied to me about who he was because he wanted to be seen as a person instead of a stereotype. And when I found out the truth, I was furious, felt betrayed. The reporter leaned in, interested. But then he died, and I realized something. We're all going to die someday, and we all make mistakes. We all lie about things we're afraid of. We all try to control how people see us. Clara gestured to the paintings around them. These are about the messy, complicated reality of loving people who are flawed, about forgiveness, about moving forward while still carrying the past. Did you forgive him? The man who lied? Clara smiled slightly. Eventually, it took a while, but yeah, I forgave him, because holding on to anger was exhausting, and because he gave me something valuable even in the mess he made. He showed me what really matters. Connection, honesty, using your time to build something good instead of just surviving. After the reporter moved on, Lily hugged Clara tight. Daddy would be proud of you. I think he'd be more proud of you. You're amazing, Lil. We're both pretty great, Lily grinned. We learned from the best, even if he was kind of an idiot sometimes. The biggest idiot, Clara agreed fondly. That night, after the show, Clara sat alone in her studio and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a broke waitress working 2 jobs to an artist with gallery representation, from someone just surviving to someone actually living. She'd taken the gift Ethan had given her, not just the money, but the wake-up call, and built something real with it. Had learned to be brave and reckless and messy in all the ways he'd encouraged. She'd also learned something he hadn't known himself, that honesty, even when it's ugly and uncomfortable, is always better than a comfortable lie. That real connection requires vulnerability. That love doesn't mean being perfect, it means being real. 10 years after Ethan's death, Clara got a call from Rachel. Lily wants to apply to art school, the fancy one in Rhode Island, but she's nervous about leaving Seattle, about leaving you. Clara's heart swelled. Tell her to apply. Tell her I'll be here when she comes back, and that I'll visit, and that I want her to chase this dream without guilt. Will you tell her? She needs to hear it from you. So Clara drove to Rachel's house, where Lily was having a minor breakdown surrounded by college brochures. I don't know if I can do it, Lily said, 17 now, and so much like her father, it hurt. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? What if you succeed? Clara countered. What if you're amazing and you build an incredible career doing something you love? What if I get there and I'm homesick and I miss you and I can't handle it? Then you come home, or I come visit, or we video chat every day. Clara sat beside her. Lil, your dad spent his whole life building things, restaurants, businesses, a legacy. But you know what he told me before he died? That he wished he'd taken more risks with the things that really mattered. That he'd wasted too much time being careful. So you think I should go? I think you should apply, see what happens, and then decide based on what you actually want, not based on fear. Lily was accepted to 3 different art schools. She chose Rhode Island. The day Clara helped her move into the dorms, they both cried, but they were good tears, proud tears. Thank you, Lily said, hugging her tight. For everything. For staying. For keeping your promise to my dad. Thank you for letting me, Clara said, for becoming one of the best things in my life. I'll call you every week. You better. Lily pulled back, looking at Clara seriously. You know you're basically my mom, right? Like, I know you're not technically, but that's what you are, what you've been. Clara's vision blurred with tears. Yeah, kid, I know. And you're basically my daughter, the one I never thought I'd have. Good. Just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. After Lily left for school, Claire's apartment felt too quiet again. But this time the quiet wasn't oppressive. It was peaceful. She'd built a life she was proud of, had kept her promises, had learned to live instead of just survive. She painted every day, taught classes twice a week, visited Lily once a month, dated occasionally, though nothing serious stuck. Maybe someday? Maybe not. She was okay either way. 15 years after Ethan's death, Clara got a call from Margaret. I'm retiring, the older woman said. Moving to Florida to be near my daughter. But before I go, I wanted to give you something. They met at a coffee shop, not one of Ethan's restaurants, but a small independent place with actually good coffee. Margaret handed Clara a box. Inside was Ethan's watch, the expensive one he'd been wearing the day he died. He left it to Lily in the will, Margaret explained, but she wanted you to have it. Said you'd understand what it meant. Clara turned the watch over in her hands. On the back was an engraving she'd never noticed before. Time is all we have. Use it well. S. Sarah. Ethan's first wife. She'd given him this watch. Why would Lily give this to me? Clara asked. Because you understood what her father learned too late. That time is precious. That wasting it on fear and lies is the real tragedy. Margaret smiled. You took what he taught you and actually lived it. That's worth more than any inheritance. Clara wore the watch every day after that. A reminder of what she'd learned, what she'd survived, what she'd built from the ashes of heartbreak. 20 years after Ethan's death, Clara attended Lily's wedding. Lily was 33, successful, happy. She'd become an illustrator for children's books, the dream Clara had once had for herself, now realized by the daughter she'd chosen. You look beautiful, Clara said, helping Lily with her veil. I wish Daddy was here, Lily said quietly. Me too. But I think he's here in a way, in all the lessons he taught us, in the ways we learned to love imperfectly but honestly. You're going to make me cry and ruin my makeup. Too bad. That's what moms do at weddings. Lily hugged her tight. I love you, Clara. Thank you for staying, for being my family when you didn't have to be. Loving you has never been an obligation, Lil. It's been the greatest privilege of my life. At the reception, Clara found herself thinking about Ethan, about the scared, dying man who'd walked into his own restaurant wearing a disguise, about the lies he'd told and the love he'd given, about the mess he'd made and the unexpected beauty that had come from it. She'd spent 20 years being angry, then grieving, then forgiving, then grateful, had learned that people were complicated, that love was messy, that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant choosing to move forward anyway. Ethan Vale had been a liar and a manipulator. He'd also been kind and generous and desperately trying to find meaning in his final days. Both things were true. Both could exist at the same time. And from that complicated truth, Clara had built something good. A life. A family. A career. A future she'd once thought was impossible. As she watched Lily dance with her new spouse, Clara touched the watch on her wrist and whispered, I used it well. I hope you can see that. I used the time well. And somewhere, in memory, in the paintings on gallery walls, in the daughter who'd grown up to chase her dreams, Ethan Vale's legacy lived on. Not in restaurants or money or business success, but in the lives he'd touched, in the love he'd given, however imperfectly, in the woman he'd helped find courage, and the daughter who'd learned to keep living even after losing everything. That was the real story. Not about a dying billionaire who disguised himself, but about what happened after, about how love survived lies, about how grief transformed into gratitude, about how broken people found each other and built something beautiful from the pieces. Clara finished her coffee, good coffee finally, and smiled. Time was all we had, and she'd used it well.